is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Excuse me, is this where I get a license to start a new business?
I wouldn't be hasty. You have to get a license to go out of business, too, you know.
Oh, well, look, I've invented this little anti-gravity machine, see?
Oh, is that why you're walking 2 inches above the floor?
Oh, yes, it's very comfortable. It saves on shoe leather.
Yeah, well, you have to fill out these forms and report to the Human Services Department of Manpower Orientation and register with the Fair Employment Practice Commission, the Wage and Hour Division of the Employment Standards Administration, the State Sales and Income Tax Division, the Internal Revenue Service, and the Social Security Administration of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and, of course, OSHA.
OSHA? I thought that was a little town in Wisconsin.
You'll find out. Say, floating around like that could be dangerous. Have you checked with the Consumer Product Safety Commission?
Well, not yet.
Come to think of it, you actually are flying, aren't you? Look, you need to go over to the Federal Aviation Administration and the Transportation...
It's very hard to get anything done these days if you're in business, but free enterprise built this country. Think what could happen if we don't keep it free. A public service of this station and the Center for the Defense of Free Enterprise, Bellevue, Washington.
Besides, we just can't have people floating about unregulated, you know.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. The US Coast Guard says people have to remain hopeful as the search...
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live from day 2 here at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Broadcast as always. We've been at this site for 3 or 4 years now. Previously, we were at the top of the hill there where Kirby Q is now. And I wanted to get that site back again this year because it's more central and it's a little bit bigger and it would be easier to plan a show there, right? Because it's got like the one main direction and that's pointed down the hill, whereas the angle there that it comes to makes a really good backdrop for me to have my back to. As we are here, I have to have my back to one of the streets.
Yeah.
And that, but things didn't work out that way. We are still here at RV46, which is fine.
Yeah.
So absolutely beautiful day. Lots going on yesterday. It was fantastic seeing more and more people rolling in throughout the day. More people continue to roll in today.
Really, and it's getting packed.
People are still setting up, and I'm happy to see it. As we mentioned yesterday, the Wormtown guys finally arrived yesterday.
They did, that's right,
apparently, we weren't the only ones worrying, worrying isn't the right word, but concerned. Are these guys coming? What's going on? And today, of course, there's vendors everywhere. There's people everywhere.
There's food, there's music, there's all sorts of fun. There's drinks, there's activities, there's talks, so many things are going on right now.
There are talks, and I was really surprised. I walked by, I think it's the fire tent earlier. I haven't looked at the map. But it's just some tent not organized by the Porcupine Freedom Festival, where someone, I think it was Zephan, who has been on the show here before. I think he was giving a speech about something.
Yeah.
And there was a decent crowd there, maybe 25, 30 people, just at this, I don't want to call it a random site, but this non-official site.
Yeah.
You don't generally expect to see crowds of that size at these unofficial events.
Right, yeah.
So it's pleasant to see that, and of course that is one of the goals of decentralizing the Porcupine Freedom Festival and getting more people doing things and getting those on the map and making people aware of them so that they can go to them and check them out and have a good time.
Yeah. I managed to invent a new cocktail.
Oh, yeah?
I don't have a name for it. It's just coffee and Captain Morgan spiced rum.
All right.
It's delicious. Somehow I never thought to combine those two particular beverages. And, wow, tasty.
I've never really combined any sort of alcohol with coffee, but then again, I'm not really a coffee drinker. So
there are a series of breakfast drinks, let's call them. So the most famous ones are screwdrivers, mimosas.
Well, that makes sense.
Right.
A screwdriver is like orange juice and vodka.
Right. And so at some point I invented the Captain Kick-Ass, which is orange juice and spiced rum.
Okay.
Stripped down pina colada, if you will. And it's also delicious. It's just, adding some vanilla flavor and some booze to your orange juice just makes it taste like orange sherbet.
I have a friend who had Bloody Marys for breakfast. Every time we go to a music festival, he gets a Bloody Mary for breakfast. I'm like, dude, it's 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
But,
Bloody Mary.
We're on vacation when this happens, so I'm joking around when I say that.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily always want, if I have a Bloody Mary, I don't want two, because, it's tomato juice and some other stuff, and it usually comes with some roughage, some celery, or some pickled beans or something in it. And so it's kind of a meal. And so because, Bloody Marys aren't my first choice of breakfast drink, and I got kind of tired of screwdrivers. I'm not that big on vodka. I was pretty happy with the spiced rum and orange juice combo. And so just out of necessity last night, I was like, I'm going to have some coffee. I got an iced coffee from Liberty over here. And then, I was at a place where there was some spiced rum. And I was like, hey, I'm going to pour some of this in my coffee. And it was delicious.
Well, that's how someone invented Reese's, presumably once upon a time. Someone was like, I've got chocolate, I've got peanut butter. I'm going to combine the two and see what happens.
You've got your peanut butter in my chocolate.
I'm not really much of a drinker, especially these days. I used to drink a lot. Like back when I actually smoked cigarettes, I would drink 2 bottles of wine a day, somewhere around there. They usually boxed wine because that's so much more cost effective, but I drank a lot of wine pretty much every day. But as I quit smoking, I found that I no longer liked the taste of red wine.
Oh,
and this was true of a bunch of different things, but it was no longer palatable to me whatsoever, and I slowly stopped drinking it. I phased it out and replaced it with vodka and a lot of screwdrivers because I was trying to add more, vitamin C and fruits and vegetables to my life. And that's an obvious way of going about that.
Yep.
Bloody Marys as well, but I didn't enjoy it still. And what I found as I took longer and longer gaps between having any sort of drink was that I don't really enjoy alcohol anymore. It just makes me feel like crap.
I still enjoy it, of course.
Right.
And I don't know that...
well, it's to each their own, right?
Yeah. I did take some time off of drinking, and so I've begun drinking again here at this festival.
Okay, well, congrats on that. I've had maybe 4 days of drinking this whole year, so that's been nice. And I was worried, especially around the time that I was drinking all that wine, I was worried that I had become like an alcoholic and that I was developing a dependency. And by that point, I'd been doing it for 2 years, so it was going to be a vicious battle when I finally stopped drinking. But it wasn't even a conscious effort to stop drinking. It was just like, I don't enjoy this anymore, so I stopped.
That's very natural, and you should follow those types of things if your body's telling you something.
Yeah.
I think my philosophy is you should listen to it.
Absolutely. I miss smoking cigarettes a lot more than I miss alcohol. And I had alcohol last night. I had a few Angry Orchard ciders, but like 2 ciders is an inconsequential amount of alcohol.
I did find myself hanging out with some smokers at the wedding reception.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because I wanted a cigarette or anything like that. I just had meandered outside, and there were a bunch of people smoking cigarettes right there, and we started talking. So occasionally I'll indulge in some secondhand smoke. Right? I'll just be around smokers, but the urge to smoke is long gone. I've been quit for, I don't know, probably 15 years now. I lost track once I hit a decade. I'm like, it's been 10 years. I'm no longer a smoker.
When I say that I miss smoking, I just mean like I have fond memories of it. But because of the manner in which I quit, like the day as I was quitting, I was around people who regularly smoked cigarettes, and it didn't faze me whatsoever. I no longer had any desire to actually use them.
Yeah.
And that's the benefit of Chantix. If someone can find it and if they can afford it, it's like $500 a month for me. Yep. And it really screws with your head.
It does.
That cannot be overstated. The weird dreams. Of course, if you're already experienced with sleep apnea and night terrors and all of that kind of crap as I was, then it's blue on black and you're not going to really notice.
Yeah.
However, for most people who have never experienced that sort of thing, Chantix is vicious. And I fully understand people not being able to see it through to the end. Although it makes it easy, right? I didn't even notice quitting smoking. It was just something that happened more or less organically because of the Chantix. Nicotine stopped having any effect on me whatsoever, and I just slowly smoked less and less until I didn't smoke any.
I quit smoking, believe it or not, for philosophical reasons. That's what actually got me to quit. So I did the gum, I tried the patch, the Chantix. I used one of the first vape nicotine, the e-cigarette that was on the market.
So what was the philosophical reason that got you to quit?
I was at a show. A friend of mine's band was playing a show, and I was outside smoking and drinking. And I was going on a rant, as folks like us like to do, about slaves and slavery and how slavery was decentralized. It wasn't really abolished.
Right.
Just everybody became sort of these part-time slaves, if you will, slavery light. And this was sort of the gist of what I was ranting about. And so I finish up, and my friend Mike comes over, and he's like, "So you really hate being a slave, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I really do." And he's like, "Well, you're a slave to R.J. Reynolds, man, with that cigarette."
Yeah,
You're R.J. Reynolds' bitch, is what he said, right? And I was like, that phrase still, when I say it right now, it echoes in my head like something out of a movie. You're R.J. Reynolds' bitch. You're R.J. Reynolds' bitch, right? Continuing to echo in my head. And so I actually went home that night. I continued smoking all night long. I went home that night, and I was having my final cigarette because I don't smoke inside. I was standing outside on the front porch stoop, and I just heard that again. You're R.J. Reynolds' bitch. And I said, I really am. And I put the cigarette out, and that was the last cigarette I ever had.
I never really minded that. These things happen. People become dependent on various things. I'm food's bitch as well, right? And the thing that sucks about cigarettes is that it's generally one specific company, or like R.J. Reynolds, or whichever the other one is, Philip Morris.
Yeah, I smoked Camels, so that wasn't really R.J. Reynolds, but whatever. The
same basic. Yeah. So I never really had an issue with that because I knew I was going to be dependent on something. But I battled different addictions in the past, and got through the withdrawals and quit doing the substance in question, and had no desire to ever go through withdrawals again. They were absolutely miserable. Not fun. Manageable, certainly, but not fun. And it's easier to avoid the dependence. And I was convinced that I was just going to die a cigarette smoker. Like, I had no desire to deal with the misery of nicotine withdrawals.
I had it justified in my head, too. I said, well, if I'm able to die because of cigarette smoking, I will have lived a full and prosperous life because, I take care of things before my cigarettes, like a roof over my head and food in the fridge and, pay my rent and, those types of things. And so I thought to myself, my self-justification was that I will have not only been able to afford to live, but then also afford cigarettes. So that was like my barometer of am I having a successful life? I can still afford to smoke. That was my justification. And so it was. It turned out that it was just me justifying to myself cigarette smoking. Right?
Yeah.
That was my way of convincing myself that it was okay, and that I was otherwise okay. And the more I thought about it, particularly after I put the cigarettes down, I was like, oh, that was the addiction part. Was the mind justifying it. As if to say, no, you can't live without me. And I totally can. And not only could I, but I did. And when I did, I also became wealthier. Because not only did I not buy 1 or 2 packs a day at the local convenience store, I stopped going to the local convenience store on a daily or even regular basis now. Because other than to get gas in my car, I didn't have a reason to go to the convenience store on a daily basis.
Right, but every smoker, when they go to buy that pack of cigarettes, they always buy a drink.
Buy a drink or buy a snack or, something that they need, grocery, last-minute thing, eggs, milk, that kind of stuff.
Right.
You see it all the time. And, I was just as guilty of that as everybody else. I would go to the convenience store for my cigarettes and then be like, oh, let me get a, a this
shopping.
or that, the other thing, a six-pack of beer.
Convenience stores subsist off of convenience shopping, off of impulse buys.
And so I stopped doing that because I no longer had the reason to. So now I could just go to the grocery store once a week for my food shopping, and that was it. So I eliminated a large expense out of my life, and I was like, oh, and this was right around the time that crypto was, sort of coming on, and I wish I'd have put more money into crypto than I did.
Hindsight's 2020. I mean, crypto could have crashed and burned, and
it's true.
So we didn't know that was going to happen. I noticed when I came to New Hampshire that cigarette smoking was no longer really economical because where I lived in Mississippi, I could buy a pack of Newports, which is what I smoked, for about $5 a pack.
Wow.
Yeah, and Marlboro Black Menthols, which were, they were the cheaper brand, but they were just over $4 a pack.
Yeah.
And that was feasible. But when I came to New Hampshire, it did not take long, like 2 or 3 months at the most, before I was doing roll your owns, which is where you buy the tubes and you get the little hand machine and you roll your own cigarettes. And you get a bag of tobacco for $20, and it's basically like 3 or 4 cartons of cigarettes. It can last a really long time. It's not as good, and it's a little tedious because you have to do it all yourself. But the cost savings are phenomenal because here in New Hampshire, I suddenly went from buying $5 a pack of cigarettes to buying $10 a pack of cigarettes. And at the same time, I was smoking more because that's how smokers tend to do. You steadily smoke more and more.
Sure do.
And it was unpleasant. It wasn't good. And it seemed to go, it went too well with the wine drinking. But on the subject of habits and cost and expenses and all of that stuff, people are shopping at Dollar Tree more than ever. 1%ers, she is on this cable again. 1%ers are shopping at the Dollar Tree. And this is what surprises me, right? Because...
Wait, 1%ers?
Yeah, that was the reason.
This means something different to you than it does to me, I think.
It means people in the top 1% of wealth.
Okay.
And I would not expect those sort of people to be shopping at the dollar store. But to even call it a dollar store now is false. They're not dollar stores. They're $1.25 stores. There is no longer a dollar store.
Yeah, they're $5 stores. I saw one here locally. It is both a Dollar Tree and a Family Dollar.
It is. I saw that.
Yeah, and I was like, wait, how did this occur? These are 2 different stores everywhere else. And they, in fact, have the 2 different signs on the building, but it is, in fact, one store.
I also found it odd to see the Family Dollar / Dollar Tree there. It reminded me of the the KFC / Taco Bell stores.
Oh, yeah, the Kentucky Taco Fried Bell Chicken.
I suspect the same sort of thing is going on here. As it turns out with the KFC and Taco Bell, I learned this very recently. It's that Coke has a monopoly on, it's not really a monopoly, but they have complete dominance in the soft drink market.
Yeah.
That's why when you go to McDonald's or Wendy's or whatever, they all serve Coca-Cola. Well, rather than compete with them, Pepsi found it easier and cheaper to just buy some fast food chains. And the ones they purchased was Pizza Hut, KFC, and Taco Bell.
Right, yeah.
And in an effort to save cost and to save money, they wanted to condense that down to as few locations as possible. So they just combined the KFC with the Taco Bell.
Right, and they also did that. There were some Pizza Bell Taco Huts.
I actually, of all of the places, I actually think I miss Pizza Hut. Because, I know that I've worked at a Pizza Hut, so I know that their dough comes frozen, right? Unless you get the pan dough, and I don't want to... They do make the pan dough from scratch. And at the store I worked at, they had a real bad mouse problem. And every day I would come into work to make the pan dough, and I would find the bags of flour having mice turds in it from mice having gotten inside and started eating it and all of that stuff. And the reason I quit was because the store manager said, you have to use it anyway. And I said, Geraldine, there's mouse turds in this flour.
Right.
And she goes, but it's food cost. You have to use it anyway. And I said, I'm not doing that. Find yourself another assistant manager.
Yeah.
I'm quitting. Because if you can't manage the place better than that, then you have to feed your customers mouse droppings. You don't deserve to be in business.
Did the store you work at have sit down restaurant?
It did have an actual lobby.
Did it have the, Miss Pac-Man, the video game, the sit-down table version?
It did when I was a kid, but by the time that I worked there, no, all of that was gone.
Because Pizza Hut, at some point they sort of morphed from a sit-down, go-to pizza place to fast food. Now they're in competition with McDonald's and Wendy's and stuff like that. Whereas at some point they had actual restaurant cred as a sit-down place. They would serve beer at the Pizza Huts and that kind of a thing. So you could go in and order a pitcher with your friends and have a pizza and sit down. They would have birthday parties and stuff, like going to, like, I don't know, like a chain place, like a Chili's or something like that. Like Pizza Hut was sort of on par with that type of a restaurant for some period of time.
I think they probably still are. I would still put them above McDonald's and Burger King and all of those.
Right, but they don't. Now most of the new Pizza Huts are just delivery and pickup. There's no more restaurant to the Pizza
Well, there's
Hut.
no money to be made on serving people. You have to have bathrooms if you do that, and then you have to hire servers, and you have to clean up. You have 3 times as many dishes as you have to wash.
They used to have a salad bar / pizza buffet.
They did. I remember that.
Yeah.
And that was miserable because I was the day shift person. So when they had the buffet, and this Pizza Hut was terribly managed. So at all times, you had one person making food. And I don't know if you know anything about making pizza, but it's not really feasible when you're dealing with hundreds of customers to have one person responsible for making all of that food. It slows things down too much, and it gave us hour-long delivery times. And then, of course, the drivers are upset because they're not getting tipped and all that.
Right.
But during day shift, those problems weren't real. You just had to worry about the buffet and keeping it stocked, and that was miserable. Because if you were even a minute late, some Karen was going to come up because these old Karens loved the buffet. And they're obviously the ones most likely to complain.
Are you calling me an old Karen?
No, not at all. You're not. No.
I love the buffet.
The ones who like to complain are the old Karens. And sure enough, if you were even a minute late in getting some more cheese or some more pepperoni or some more sausage pizza out there, they were up there complaining, I paid for my buffet. And I wanted my sausage pizza. Absolutely miserable experience. Do not miss it. I was going to begin talking about the Dollar Tree thing, but I don't really want to talk about that. Yesterday, you also mentioned slavery.
I did, yeah.
And that's the topic I really want to get into because yesterday was Juneteenth, and I'm not 100% sure what that means. I think that means that was the day that...
Do you have a magic rectangle?
I do, but it's not practical for me to look things up while holding a microphone and doing the show. I want to say it was the day that Abraham Lincoln made the Emancipation Proclamation. It was either that or the day that the 13th Amendment was passed. It's widely regarded, at the very least on the internet, as the day that slavery ended. And this is where I take issue with it. Slavery was not ended.
My magic rectangle says, Juneteenth is an annual holiday observing the end of slavery in the U.S. It marks the day, June 19th, 1865, when news of emancipation reached people in the deepest parts of the former Confederacy in Galveston, Texas.
Okay, so yeah, the Emancipation Proclamation, more or less. But it didn't end slavery. It just moved it. The 13th Amendment holds that slavery is allowable for punishment for a crime. I have it here in front of me if I can find it again. Yes, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, which is good, right? That's great. But notice that part about except as punishment for a crime, and then look at everything that has happened since the last century and a half of expansion of regulation and the law, where the average American citizen commits 3 felonies a day.
That's right.
The only thing stopping you from being a slave, according to the 13th Amendment, is that the FBI hasn't prosecuted you, hasn't gone after you for those 3 felonies a day that you're otherwise committing.
Right.
And that's not ending slavery. It's just moving it. Plus, at the same time, police officers have jurisdiction. And you know what police officers in the South do when they have jurisdiction and they can choose which person to pull over when they see someone speeding?
Yep.
And then they can choose which person they call out the canines for. It leads inexorably to them doing this for a very specific person. Generally, especially in the South, but it's all over the United States. I don't want to blame just the South for this. There's a reason that the half of the populations in prisons and jails are Black Americans. And it's not because they commit more crimes. It's because police officers have this thing called discretion. And when they see a white dude speeding and they see a black dude speeding, they can decide which one they can and do decide which one to pull over. Right. And that feeds into those statistics. So at the same time that slavery became permissible only as punishment for a crime, they passed a whole slew of laws.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. The US Coast Guard says people have to remain hopeful as the search for a submersible with 5 people aboard continues. Officials say underwater noises have been detected near the Titanic's wreck, where the small vessel disappeared. Gabriel Fami reports.
The U.S. Coast Guard says it doesn't know what the noises are, but on Wednesday, several aircrafts heard banging sounds at 30-minute intervals. The good news, it says, is that allowed it to deploy even more resources to that area. This is a search and rescue operation. The 5 people on board are thought to have less than a day's worth of oxygen left, so time is of the essence. The vessel lost contact less than 2 hours into its dive in a remote part of the North Atlantic Sea. It was diving to the Titanic's wreck, which is about 700 kilometers south of the Canadian province of Newfoundland.
President Volodymyr Zelensky says reconstruction is key to restoring normal life in Ukraine, which will mark a real victory against Russia. He was remotely addressing the Ukraine Recovery Conference in London, which is seeking to find ways to build confidence in investing in the country.
The eyes of the world are looking at us and at whether we will defeat Russian aggression exactly as freedom deserves to win, that is without compromising our values. Also, the world is watching to see if we will restore normal life in such a way that our transformation will land an ideological defeat on the aggressor.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon has reported an accounting error that's led to the overvaluing of aid it provides to Ukraine. The military aid was overvalued by $6.2 billion over the past 2 years, and the Pentagon says this has resulted in a surplus that will be used for future security packages. India's Prime Minister is in the United States on his first state visit, the highest diplomatic protocol accorded by the US to visiting leaders. Narendra Modi is slated to hold talks with US President Joe Biden on Thursday, and experts say China is driving this Indo-US engagement. Nihar Punia has more on the defence deals that will likely be announced on this trip.
For the US, this visit is crucial from 2 points of view: weaning New Delhi away from its traditional defence partner Russia, and also equipping India to militarily counter China in the Indo-Pacific, which is why as many as 5 defence deals are likely to be announced. This includes India buying MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones from the US and a technology transfer that could allow India to manufacture GE's F414 jet engines locally. There's also talk of the countries jointly manufacturing armoured vehicles and ammunition.
At least 29 people have been hurt in an explosion in central Paris. Authorities say the cause of the explosion is still being investigated. From bureaus worldwide, this.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you can come hang out with us at RV46. We're here for the rest of the week at the Porcfest Freedom Festival, recording the show and then playing it live. It's called live to tape. When you do this sort of thing, you record it, and then we broadcast it for the first time live, so to speak, at 7 p.m. tonight. I can only imagine what poor Sarah is doing now that we're not taking calls. Now, she's been a regular caller, pedestrian Sarah, yes, for a very long time.
Are you really worried about what Sarah's doing?
No, but it's funny, and it's amusing, right? I am a little bit worried about it because she's nuts, and she may wander, she's dumb, and she may wander, to be fair, she's not dumb, but she may wander off into the streets and get hit by a car. That would be absolutely tragic.
That would be horrible.
It would be ironic and hilarious, but simultaneously quite tragic. So anyway, she doesn't listen to the show, but she calls in, and she's been calling in for like 6-7 years. Pretty much as long as I've been doing Free Talk Live, Sarah from New Mexico has been calling and going, yes, as she does. And Forkfest 3 years ago, I remember it was the same year that FUD played and the same year that we had this spot up here. Mm-hmm. That was when she stopped calling. She was a regular caller. Then we went to Forkfest and the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and then she just stopped calling. And it took about 2 years before she began calling again. And as it turns out, this was because she became homeless. I think she says she got depressed and ended up being homeless or something. And then she hooked up with this older dude named Richard, and now they bought a townhouse. I was like, good on you, Sarah, I guess.
Richard used to call, too. I remember that guy because
he did.
I think he wears a hearing because he talks like this all the time.
Yes, he shouts
like constantly
into his
yelling
phone.
at, yes, hi, I'm calling because...
I do like Richard, though, and I'm
call.
glad they have worked out their whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah.
And Sarah initially denied that she was in a relationship with Richard, right? And she was paying rent, and she was occasionally getting rent reduction by cleaning the house naked and stuff. Then, of course, Ricky from Pennsylvania tried getting hooked up with Sarah, and that was a weird night, dude. I did not see any of that coming, and I don't even know why it happened. Yeah. But suddenly Ian was playing matchmaker between Sarah from New Mexico and Ricky from Pennsylvania. And that was a bizarre experience. The whole thing was bizarre, but not as bizarre as the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which isn't bizarre for me, but for the average person coming here has to be a shocking, jarring experience. And I almost remember what it was like to come here for the first time and be surrounded by libertarians who actually valued the ideas of liberty.
Sure.
I don't truly remember, though, what it was like. And now I just take it for granted, just like I take it for granted that we live in New Hampshire and that I can hang out with libertarians anytime I want.
Yeah.
But that's unusual for most people. Most people don't get to experience it, and the first time they ever do experience it is here at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, where you can use goldbacks. There are more goldback stickers here than there were even last year.
Yeah.
And I love to see it. And I've got to remember to take some Free Talk Live stickers down to the Goldback booth later, because Free Talk Live, Ian in particular, was what brought Goldbacks here all those years ago. He was the first person to have the Utah Goldbacks here on the site. And I, incidentally, was the first person to price anything in Goldbacks.
That's right. You did your wine thing or whatever it was, right, in Goldbacks.
It was $1 per cup of wine, and it was tremendously successful. I'm assuming, I don't know. I didn't keep very good track of things, and I had gold at the end of it. I don't know how much, and I don't know if it even paid for the wine. I'm assuming it did, but that was the first time that happened, and that was when the Porcupine Freedom Festival was introduced to the Goldback. And the next year was after Ian and I had been raided, and Ian was no longer allowed to attend the Porcupine Freedom Festival.
Right.
Well, actually, I think we weren't even allowed to contact each other during that first Porcupine Freedom Festival. So that was super awkward. Me up here doing a show, not being able to contact the people in the studio to make sure the show was being done. But Ben and someone else from Goldback wanted a site to camp at. And I was like, here, absolutely, use our site.
Yeah.
And we provided them with the site. Someone else allowed them a better site a few days into it, so they did that. And it's just been gradually expanding and growing since. Where now there's we accept Goldback stickers here everywhere. I wish Ian was here to see it, because Ian, when I went down last night to talk to Ben about various things, he was like, well, you made this happen. I was like, no, I didn't, though, right? All I did was offer you a site after Ian had already made all of the contact and all of that.
Yeah.
Ian is the one who did this, and I wish he was here to see it. I mean, he will be coming up, right? He is absolutely coming back up. I don't have his permission to say when, and I don't want him to be swarmed by people who are only going to see him for the one day, so I'm not going to announce when. I'll talk to him about that and find out if he's okay with it. But he's coming up here twice more, at least. So he will see the Goldbacks everywhere. And,
good.
And I think that will be good.
Because,
it was 100% him.
To be able to see the progress that has been made just even here, right, in what ought to be the Goldback Mecca. Right, I think this particular festival, the Porcupine Freedom Festival, should be, every vendor here should be accepting Goldbacks.
Last year, there were a few of the food trucks that Sean of Chuck Wagon Soda, he had a bunch of food trucks, and he sold them, I think, 2 years ago, and a lot of the people who bought them were not initially accepting Goldbacks. It was dollars only and cards only. And that's not the kind of answer I expect to get. Look, when I go up to your booth at the Porcupine Freedom Festival and I ask you how I can pay, I don't expect you to say debit card.
Right.
And I'm not going to use a debit card at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. And I would encourage everyone, unless it's one of those Crypto.com cards, and even then, why not just use the crypto directly?
Yeah.
I would use cash here because I can't use cryptocurrency. I'm still under legal restrictions. I'm going to prison in just over 7 days.
Yep.
I'm under restrictions that prevent me from using cryptocurrency, but I can use gold backs, and I'm going to use gold backs. It saddens me to see a place that only accepts dollars and cards, because I'm like, that's not what we're trying to do. I understand you're here to make money, right? That's why you have this thing, but we're here to promote the ideas of liberty, and we can do those two things together. You can make your money and have your food truck and all that stuff, and we can promote the ideas of liberty and decentralized currencies, but we can only do those things together in tandem if you're willing to accept these alternative currencies. But thankfully, this year, that is the case. I'm proud to announce that I bought some loaded fries last night that I shared with my dog with goldbacks, whereas last year it was... And when I asked him last night if he was taking any, I don't remember how I phrased it. He was like, yeah, cash and card. And then goes, oh, yeah, we're also taking goldbacks. Oh, okay. Well, that's more like it. But it was like an afterthought because it's new to them, and I appreciate that. And I'm glad they're coming back to it. I'm glad we didn't give them too hard a time about it last year. But we do sort of expect to be able to use cryptocurrencies and goldbacks. I
bought my lunch with goldbacks today.
Yeah, I've bought everything here on site with goldbacks, I believe. I don't recall spending dollars anywhere, unless it was like at the office at Rogers.
I bought coffee with goldbacks.
Surprisingly, I mean, and I'm not going around looking for people at the moment that they're buying stuff, but I don't see a lot of cryptocurrency usage. I see significantly more goldback usage.
I've sold some EPs for cryptocurrency and some T-shirts. Probably my transactions have been 50% crypto, 50% goldbacks.
Okay.
And some cash
that's not bad.
Some cash thrown in there too, because I said I wasn't going to take cash for the EPs, and I've pretty well stuck to that.
Awesome.
I made one exception.
Well, again, people can come buy gold from me, and then they can use that gold to buy the EPs from you.
Correct.
That's ideal, because I posted it in the Forkfest chat today as well, in the Porcupine Freedom off-topic chat. You know, on the way up here, I literally stopped and paid a $2,500 fine to the federal government.
Yep.
And I have an additional $2,500 fine to pay them at some point in the future. So selling some gold to make that happen is ideal. But I want to get Sean on at some point this year. We get him on every year, and he does chuck wagon sodas. You get a still mug for $20 and unlimited refills. It's really hard to beat, and it's all natural. I think it doesn't contain any corn syrup. It's just sugar, and it is a soft drink, right? It's homemade root beer, birch beer, cream soda, orange soda. It's fantastic. And
sounds delicious.
For $20, you get a steel cup, and I've got about. I actually have 6 of these now. I should have 7, but I lost the one from the first year. Yeah. And they're so useful for stuff, especially like razors or anything that you need to store in your bathroom. Just plop it down in there because it's solid steel.
Yeah, right.
It's going to last forever, and it's not going to rust. Drop some alcohol in there, like some isopropyl alcohol, and set your razors in there, and they'll last basically forever.
For sure.
There's a few people that I get on here every year at the Porcupine Freedom Festival that I'm looking forward to. And of course, Crosby, the owner of the park.
Yeah.
I'm still surprised by how many people call him Roger. And I don't know if he ever bothers to correct them on that. But I saw it last night while I was in there buying, I think, some ciders or something.
Yeah.
And someone was like, "How are you, Roger?" And I'm like, man.
I mean,
that's not his name.
Like, I understand how people make that correlation. It's
sure.
Roger's Campground.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh, look, there's the owner. And you're like, oh, that must be Roger. It's his campground. But no, it's Crosby.
It was called Rogers when he bought it.
Right.
And I think he bought it in the 90s or the 80s. He's had it for a really long time. And, I mean, he basically considers it to be his life work. So we get Crosby on. We get Sean on of Chuck Wagon Sodas. We get Jeffrey Tucker, Tom Woods. Looking forward to both of those again because last year Jeffrey Tucker talked about this thing called the Pendleton Act. Mm-hmm. And I want to say thank you to Mark Edge for reminding me what this was called. This was an act that was passed in like the 1800s, like the 1870s, 1880s. I don't remember exactly when.
Okay.
But it gave the executive branch it gave the president the inability to fire a lot of the executive offices, right? You would expect that the president can just fire the transportation department, the Bureau of Prisons, or whoever, and just hire whatever libertarian people he wanted. But in actuality, because of the Pendleton Act, he can't do that. He's very limited in who he can fire and how much control he can exercise over things like the Department of Education, Homeland Security, these institutions, they exist independently of the executive branch now, and without answering to the executive branch.
Yeah, so people falsely believe that the president has the power to start a clean house, when in fact that's not the case.
They think that Trump can just go in there and drain the swamp, but in reality, because of the Pendleton Act, Trump has absolutely almost no ability to drain the swamp. He may be able to replace a few heads here and there, but it's meaningless, the amount of power that he actually wields over these institutions. Jeffrey Tucker called it the administrative state, and that's what we're dealing with. We're ruled not by an executive branch, but by a bureaucracy, an administrative bureaucracy. And he talked about that last year, and I didn't know any of this. I assumed, like most people did, that we could just elect Ron Paul and he could go in there and fix everything. Ron Paul, incidentally, is one of the few people I would trust to actually go in there and do that. I suspect a lot of libertarians would become drunk with the power and was like, well, I want to, we'll do that later. We'll decentralize and be free later. First, I want to exercise some of this authority. But I would trust Ron Paul to do it. But I operated under the assumption that we could get Ron Paul as president. Obviously, this was never going to happen. But, in theory, get someone like Ron Paul to become president. He goes in and he actually drains the swamp. But no, that's actually not possible. And I didn't even know that until we had Jeffrey Tucker here on the show last year at the Porcupine Freedom Festival.
Yeah.
And Tom Woods introduced me. If you've never sat with Tom Woods, you've got to, because he's also a metal musician. Well, he's not a musician. He's a metalhead. Sorry.
Oh, I did not know that.
He may or may not be a musician. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't met the man.
But he sat down with Ian and I about 3 years ago, and he introduced me to like 5 or 6 different metal bands that he had just become aware of, and they were a little heavier than what I normally listen to, but they were good, and it was right up my alley, and I was just shocked that Tom Woods, the straight-laced, ordinary. There's nothing ordinary about Tom Woods, but Tom Woods listens to metal.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so just surprises like that.
I respect that.
Yep. And Nicholas Sarwark has been at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. I saw someone here with Sarwark for county attorney signs somewhere. I don't know if he's actually here.
Too, yeah. I did see somebody took a photo, a disgusting photo of the bus for Vivek.
Okay.
And it's I mean, the bus itself is nice, but then it's got this like just huge photo of Vivek.
Oh, goodness.
Right, just plastered, and it takes up, half of the bus on the side, and apparently it pulled in this morning. I don't know where it is now, but somebody sent me a picture of it, and I'm just like, how much ego do you have, to put a giant picture of yourself all super close up on the giant side of a bus? Like, I get putting your name on it or whatever, but like...
I talked to the guy at the Vivek booth yesterday briefly, and I was really surprised because he asked me something. I mentioned Free Talk Live, and he mentioned the possibility of getting Vivek on here. So he goes, oh, yeah, I used to listen to that back in 2010 when it was just Mark and Ian. I'm like, what the hell are you doing running Vivek's booth then? So I ended up taking a picture of it, and I sent it to Mark and Ian. I said, hey, this fag used to listen to Free Talk Live, and now he's championing Vivek. And Ian goes, gay. But he did mention the possibility of getting Vivek on the show, and I'm willing to have Vivek on the show here. I told him that we're going to be here until Sunday.
I'll talk to anyone, but
Yeah, and the guy said, well, he's going to be pretty busy when he gets here Saturday. He may not be able to get on. I was like, well, then he probably won't be able to get on, because after today, I won't be on the show anyway. But even then, my ability to get on a presidential candidate would be limited to mostly like Tuesdays and Wednesdays, because Ian is not going to have on your presidential candidate. He's just not going to do it.
Right.
And he wouldn't be super thrilled that we gave you a microphone, but I'm going to do it because he's not going to be like, oh, no, we're not playing this, right? Because he's Ian, he's cool. But not super thrilled about having standard politicians on the show. Totally get it. Vivek may have something interesting to say. I just want to hold him accountable for his "we need a hot war with Mexico" nonsense and his border hawk stuff. And
yeah. I would probably try to wake the guy up, right? See where he's at philosophically. Does he agree that, introduce him to the non-aggression principle if he's never heard of it, if he knows what it is, start asking questions surrounding that. That's usually a good way to gauge where somebody's at philosophically.
Yep. That's why I wasn't, an advocate of banning these people from the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Vivek wants to come speak and RFK wants to come speak. I'm 100% okay with that. I don't think we should have given in to their demands to give them a gun-free zone. And I think that was only RFK. I don't think Vivek asked for that. But,
I don't know about that, but it was at least RFK.
Yeah, but I would get RFK on as well to ask him the same sort of question. Well, first of all, will you pardon Ross Ulbricht and Julian Assange?
Yeah.
Will you cease prosecuting people for exercising their First Amendment rights? Will you cease prosecuting people for exercising their rights at all?
How about victimless crimes?
Right. Oh, God, that would be ideal.
This is my... there's all sorts of people who... sort of defend police or defend military and all that kind of stuff, and that's their privilege. You can do that if you want to, but it always gets me because those things exist in violation of consent.
Yes, by definition.
Yeah, and so if you can think about it logically, you should be able to arrive at the conclusion that those types of organizations are the antithesis of freedom.
Yeah. I was also interested in getting Tulsi Gabbard on, but it seems like she canceled, so she's not actually going to be here for that to happen in the first place. And again, I would only like to talk to Tulsi because, as I understand it, she's anti-war. But none of these politicians, Tulsi Gabbard might actually be willing to come on and talk to us, and maybe Vivek, but I don't think the rest of them will, and I don't think Vivek himself will do it because we're antagonistic of them. They don't want to talk to us.
Yeah.
They want to talk to Democrats and Republicans that are going to agree with them, not hold their feet to the flames and not challenge them or ask them why the hell they want a hot war with Mexico.
Yeah, they probably just want to talk to people who already agree with them.
Yeah.
So that they can get their vote.
And that's what they'll be doing here at the pavilion when they give their little speeches. I know a lot of libertarians had this dreamy idea of somehow turning RFK into a libertarian by challenging him and asking him questions and getting him caught and making him go, oh, I guess you're right. I never thought about that. But the dude is only taking 3 questions, and they've been pre-planned.
It's like shiny object syndrome, right?
Yeah. So he may, and I suspect he may even be disingenuous about this. Like, does anyone have any questions? And then look around for his 3 plants.
Right. Yeah.
I suspect he'll do that. That would be really gross. But if you're going to only take pre-planned questions, why even do the questions? Just drop the pretense.
Yeah.
Give your speech and say no questions and get out.
Yeah. And that's the part that I don't like about what's going to happen is, like, if you want to get to know libertarians, just show up.
Yeah.
Just maybe get a space or a hotel room or whatever, right? You can have your armed guards. That's fine. We're all armed and all that kind of stuff.
I'm surrounded by armed guards here.
Yeah.
Never felt safer.
You just fit right in, and then walk around, meet people, buy something, sit down at a fire, right, and talk with these people. Don't come out and give a speech. Don't come out and give a one-way thing.
Well, the thing is, they don't want to sit down and talk to people because that suggests that they have something to learn.
Yeah.
And the problem in the United States, as we saw with Gary Johnson's campaign in 2016, was that the presidential candidate, the politicians, are supposed to have all the answers. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if they don't have the answer. They're just supposed to make something up and be wrong because anything is better than saying, I don't know. And we saw this with Gary Johnson asking, what is Aleppo? And this is, it's funny, absolutely, I'm with you, but it's significant because what's wrong with saying, I don't know anything about the situation that you're asking me about? I love a presidential candidate who has the courage and the integrity to say, I'm not familiar enough with this topic to weigh in. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what Gary Johnson said when he asked, what is Aleppo? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. However, the American populace and libertarians just absolutely revolted over that question, saying, oh, he should have pretended to know the answer. He should have just made something up, or he should have known the answers. Why do you expect politicians to always have all the answers? And politicians want you to think that they always have all of the answers.
Yeah.
And libertarians are falling for this too, as we saw with Gary Johnson, because then they can convince you that they have the answer, or to just give them power so they can implement their answer. At the root of all of that is this desire that politicians are all-knowing. And that's why they don't want to sit down and have a conversation with us. Vivek could absolutely sit down and have a conversation with us, or RFK, or any of these presidential candidates.
Yep.
But they're going to try to sell us their solutions.
Right.
And what we do, we literally are doing this on the air. We sell them our solutions.
Yeah.
So we reach an impasse very quickly. And I don't think that's what they want. I think they want that one-way platform to just say their piece.
It seems to me that more people should be able to come to the conclusion that you cannot fix the system with the system. It's not possible. It's not going to happen. You're just not going to do it.
You would think so, man, but Americans don't realize that, and they don't understand how dire the situation really is. Like the economy, the approach to World War III, BRICS, which is a union of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and a few other countries where they're working to de-dollar themselves, to use a different currency as their standard. And that's going to be catastrophic to the U.S. economy. The only thing keeping the U.S. economy going right now is the fact that we can export dollars to countries, and they want the dollars. We don't. The United States doesn't export anything else. It's just sheets of paper. And as soon as the rest of the world decides they don't want those sheets of paper anymore, then no one's shipping anything else to the United States.
Well, and let's not forget the other half of that equation, which is the largesse of the U.S. military, the empire that it has built.
Also true.
With, over 200 stations that we know about, or stations, bases, 200 military bases that we know about, is the largest empire planet Earth has ever seen. So,
and they will fight tooth and nail to maintain that empire. Once it starts slipping...
Right, so those dollars that they are exporting are enforced by the largesse of the military empire. And that's what really backs the dollar.
Yes.
Is the might, the violence of the United States as an empire.
And once this all comes to a head, you won't have the chance to... You have to prep now. You won't have the chance to buy your gold and silver and your alternative currencies, your euros and rubles and whatever else to diversify and get yourself away from the U.S. dollar. Once all of this happens, it's going to escalate very, very quickly. And I want people out there to be safe and protected. And the best way I can tell for people to do this is to get away from the USD, to get into cryptocurrency, to get into gold and silver, lead, grow a garden in your backyard. Good God, that's the best thing you can do. Just have a garden. Just grow some potatoes and some peas and beans and stuff. It's super easy.
Some herbs in your window or something.
Yeah, you can't screw it up. Well, you can't really subsist off of herbs. But
no, but it'll get you started with growing stuff and figuring out how to do all that.
It's critically important that you have a way to keep your family fed if all things, come to a crashing end, as they might. There is more coming up here, including other events. There's more people to talk to. It is Free Talk Live.
If you're looking for work, it's a process of elimination, and you're trying not to be eliminated. So here's a tip for making the cut, and this might seem subtle, but to the person interviewing you, it's not. There is a world of difference between applicants who convey, "I need a job," and those who simply ooze, "I want to work," especially in these lean times when many you're competing with will seem desperate in "I'll take anything" mode. If you convey specific interest in this job at this company, you will be conspicuous. Thus, the value of going to school on the company you're applying to before the interview. With money and attention so tight now, effective communication skills have never been more important. For more tips for job seekers and everyone else, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
Free speech is protected on the internet, right? Not always. Government agencies try to limit free speech and commerce on the net. Luckily, when they do, the Institute for Justice is there to defend your First Amendment right to free speech. IJ helped set the first federal precedent for internet free speech in 1999, and ever since has worked to prevent unconstitutional roadblocks in cyberspace. Visit our website today at ij.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
The latest episode of Free Talk Live continues with Hour 2 up next after the news here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. The US Coast Guard says people have to remain hopeful as the search for a submersible with 5 people aboard continues. Officials say underwater noises have been detected near the Titanic's wreck, where the small vessel disappeared. Gabrielle Fahmy reports.
The U.S. Coast Guard says it doesn't know what the noises are, but on Wednesday, several aircrafts heard banging sounds at 30-minute intervals. The good news, it says, is that allowed it to deploy even more resources to that area. This is a search and rescue operation. The 5 people on board are thought to have less than a day's worth of oxygen left, so time is of the essence. The vessel lost contact less than 2 hours into its dive in a remote part of the North Atlantic Sea. It was diving to the Titanic's wreck, which is about 700 kilometers south of the Canadian province of Newfoundland.
President Volodymyr Zelensky says reconstruction is key to restoring normal life in Ukraine, which will mark a real victory against Russia. He was remotely addressing the Ukraine Recovery Conference in London, which is seeking to find ways to build confidence in investing in the country.
The eyes of the world are looking at us and at whether we will defeat Russian aggression exactly as freedom deserves to win, that is without compromising our values. Also, the world is watching to see if we will restore normal life in such a way that our transformation will land an ideological defeat on the aggressor.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon has reported an accounting error that's led to the overvaluing of aid it provides to Ukraine. The military aid was overvalued by $6.2 billion over the past 2 years, and the Pentagon says this has resulted in a surplus that will be used for future security packages. India's Prime Minister is in the United States on his first state visit, the highest diplomatic protocol accorded by the US to visiting leaders. Narendra Modi is slated to hold talks with US President Joe Biden on Thursday, and experts say China is driving this Indo-US engagement. Nihal Punia has more on the defense deals that will likely be announced on this trip.
For the US, this visit is crucial from 2 points of view: weaning New Delhi away from its traditional defense partner Russia, and also equipping India to militarily counter China in the Indo-Pacific, which is why as many as 5 defense deals are likely to be announced. This includes India buying MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones from the US and a technology transfer that could allow India to manufacture GE's F414 jet engines locally. There's also talk of the countries jointly manufacturing armored vehicles and ammunition.
At least 29 people have been hurt in an explosion in central Paris. Authorities say the cause of the explosion is still being investigated. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more detail today at the safety of deep-sea submersibles like the one that went missing in the Atlantic, with 5 people aboard hoping to see the wreck of the Titanic. It's been pointed out this week that more human beings have flown in space than have explored the deepest areas of the world's oceans. But as the plight of the Ocean Gate Expedition submersible has illustrated, it is a deeply hazardous endeavour. Jared Hill, senior reporter with CBS News, has more.
It has had a number of successful journeys down to the Titanic and down in that area, but again, they do repeatedly say that this is a dangerous mission. We do know that there have been some questions raised even by a CBS News correspondent who took one of these trips, who was looking at the vessel itself and looking at some of the capabilities, and he was raising questions about, this maybe doesn't seem the most sophisticated. This is not a massive submarine that some people may be thinking about. This is about the size of a minivan. There is not a huge stash of food or water. So this is a vessel that is designed for these types of quick exploratory trips.
There are only 5 countries with submersibles capable of taking humans to some of the lowest depths on the planet, and this week's events will lead to a fresh focus on their safety. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denzelo reports.
For years, Southwest Airlines has boasted having the most loyal customers in the industry. Now the low-cost carrier is calling on its most frequent customers to finally do something in return for the airline. The company rolled out their new Loyalty Goes Both Ways program in a new ad campaign.
You said you wanted free check bags, and we listened. Now you listen to us.
Southwest's program is part of a new trend of companies not letting their customers exploit them anymore. CEO Gary C. Kelly has gone as far as to record this radio ad, which Southwest started airing nationwide.
Hi, this is Southwest CEO Gary Kelly. If my wife calls asking about me, I need you to lie and say I was with you. Remember all those low fares I gave you.
To any Southwest customers thinking about saying they're too busy to help, Kelly has some harsh words saying, quote, "We're always there for our customers. To anyone who can't do us a solid now and then, f*** you. That's not loyalty, that's freeloading."
This is the Onion News Network.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and as always, we are, well, not as always, but we are here from the Porcupine Freedom Festival in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Absolutely gorgeous day. The weather is absolutely fantastic. It's not too hot, not too cold. Yesterday, I just had the sun blaring down on my shoulders all day, and I was a little bit worried I was going to get sunburned. Ultimately, not an issue because I'm already dark enough, but absolutely not an issue today. The sky is overcast and it's just perfect weather for today. It's like this is like Kashmir Valley levels of perfect.
Temperature is great today.
And of course, yesterday was Juneteenth. They did a show live from the studio, so because we have to get a day ahead of things for various reasons. But they did a show last night at the studio, so I don't know what they talked about because I didn't listen to it. But I do know what we talked about. It was a lot of fun, and I look forward to listening to that episode at some point. But previously today, we were talking about Juneteenth and slavery, and how the 13th Amendment, or the Emancipation Proclamation, didn't really do anything to eliminate slavery.
Right.
It did ostensibly. It moved the problem, where previously it changed the owner of the slave from the white plantation owner, or just the plantation owner in general, to the government, to the state.
Yeah.
Because now you commit any sort of crime and they can punish you with hard labor, and suddenly you are literally a slave.
Yeah, people think that that's a metaphor that libertarians use about the government. They say, well, that's a metaphor. No, it's not. It's precisely what your relationship with the government is. It's involuntary.
It is the relationship we have. I don't like the tax slavery thing. And I get where they're coming from, right? If you are a slave because 100% of your labor is going to someone who owns you, then at what percentage are you
no longer a slave? Right.
So I understand where they're coming from when they say tax slave, but I don't think the polemic does us any good. I don't think it's a useful way of convincing people to the ideas of liberty. I think it's just, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just bloviating. That's not really the word I'm looking for because I don't want to be that critical of it, but it's just sort of bloviating a position and expecting everyone else to agree with you. Similar to saying taxation is theft, right? Like, I agree with it. I know where you're coming from, and you're right. But it's not going to persuade people. It's not going to convince people. But Juneteenth, or the Emancipation Proclamation, it absolutely did not end slavery, and most people acknowledge this and they accept this. For one, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't have any effect in the Confederate States at the time that it was announced. So until the Confederate States won the war, that law didn't even apply there, or that proclamation didn't even apply there in the first place.
Okay.
Because it's like, it would be like Xi Jinping in China declaring that the United States will no longer use the U.S. dollar. It's unenforceable. It's meaningless until the Chinese government presumably, were to take over the United States or insert whatever scenario in which such a crazy thing would happen.
Yeah.
But because of that, the United States, they didn't want too much freedom for the black Americans. So they passed a bunch of laws. And first of all, they didn't allow them to vote. They didn't allow them to count as full people. They did all sorts of evil, horrific things. But among the other things they did was passed a lot of ridiculous laws, most notably the marijuana laws. And I'm not saying that because more black people smoke pot. I mean, it's marijuana. That was largely targeting the Hispanics. But it also has been used and still is used disproportionately against black Americans.
Sure.
Almost everyone I know has smoked pot at some point in their lives. But I'm from the South, from the state of Mississippi, which has the highest proportion of black Americans in the U.S., like 38% or so. So they're still a minority, but like 38 out of every 100 Americans there are black. And almost everyone I knew who had been in jail for any sort of possession or pot possession was black. And I knew almost no white people who had been. And the reason for this, as we mentioned, is because the police officers exercise discretion about who they're going to pull over.
Yeah.
They see the white man, they see the black man, they choose which one they want to pull over, they get the K-9, and then it's not that the white man didn't have pot, it's that they didn't pull him over, and therefore they didn't search him with the K-9 vehicle, and therefore they didn't end up searching his vehicle. And they did this and the pot propaganda that they pushed out back then. If you've never looked into it, it's wild.
Oh, reefer madness. Yeah, absolutely. It is wild. Like some of the things they said about it.
It was going to make your white women lust after the... It was crazy. Just totally crazy.
Yeah.
Definitely worth looking into. And you got to remember, in this context, we hear that and we laugh and go, oh my God, these people are nuts. What were they thinking? This happened.
Yes.
This was actual propaganda used by the U.S. government to convince people that pot should be illegal.
Yeah. Just, and like that type of behavior continues by the U.S. government. We look at the Twitter files, right? Matt Taibbi was, he got to look into all that and write about it. And as a result of his simply reporting, right, him being given access, he is now being sort of persecuted by the press to such an extent.
Is he?
Yeah, to such an extent that he actually has said something along the lines of free speech is dying and journalists are the ones killing it.
I was going to make a similar remark, not quite as eloquently. I was going to point out that it's crazy that someone who released information to the public, critical, important information released to the public, is being crucified by the media, whose job it is to release that information to the public. But they're too busy being in bed with the U.S. government to actually do their jobs, and that's been going on for a very long time.
And that's the point that Taibbi made in the article that I read about him, where he made that quote, was that the journalists fancy themselves as also being in power and part of the power structure now, and they enjoy that, right?
Well,
and that is a
dangerous
place for journalists to be.
I felt weird yesterday when I was talking with Carla and someone from the Boston Globe when Carla said, yeah, you're with the press to this person at the Boston Globe. And I'm like, but so am I, technically. I do a nationally syndicated radio show, but we're different, right? We're not with the press. I don't know why we don't count as the press. And I don't want to count as the press. It's just curious that if you had some other radio show here doing it, like Rush Limbaugh or whatever, people would know this is the mainstream media.
Right.
Even as conservative as he is. Tucker Carlson, another example, not as dependent today, but he wouldn't be considered independent and free. He might now that he's left Fox News, actually.
Maybe.
But I learned of something today in regard to Juneteenth and the abolition of slavery. And don't get me wrong, Obviously, abolishing slavery, great thing.
Yeah.
Really glad that happened. It was going to happen anyway.
Let's just continue and abolish the rest of it.
Absolutely. And it's only in the United States that slavery is partially illegal. Slavery exists throughout the world. The lithium mining that you have for your cell phone batteries and for your electric cars, disgusting amounts of child slavery and other forms of slavery going into that. Like, people are being maimed and killed. Children are being maimed and killed in order to mine this lithium. It's absolutely horrific. And that's just this one scenario. You start factoring things like cocaine and other areas in South America. There's slavery everywhere. There's a long way to go in regard to eliminating slavery. But one of the things I did not know about was these forced apprenticeships that came about in the 19th century. The so-called
forced apprenticeships?
Yes, the so-called black codes that existed in 1865 and 1866. Well, that was when they came into existence. Notice, let's repeat that. They came into existence in 1865. The first were enacted in Mississippi following the election of a new state legislature in 1865. Now, this was after the defeat in the Civil War, where they were required, I think, I may be wrong here, it's not really important, but they had to vote in an entirely new legislature because their previous one, these are treasonous people and they have to be replaced. So in 1865, Mississippi, where I'm from, sadly, passed these first black codes. The codes passed by the state legislature recognized certain rights for former slaves, which is good. However, accompanying restrictions led to severe limitations on the rights of freedom, while also ensuring that former slaves would continue to be exploited for cheap labor in the state. The primary issues addressed in the codes were civil rights, apprenticeships, vagrancy, and criminal law. And I'm going to jump ahead a bit and go ahead and spill the beans on this. The apprenticeship thing was if you were a minor and believed to be a runaway or they weren't with your adult, they would force you to agree to being someone's apprentice and you couldn't do anything about it. And just like that, you were a slave again. Only now they called it an apprentice instead of an actual slave. And I didn't even know this. I knew all sorts of messed up things had happened in the South right after the Civil War and before and after the Civil War, but I never knew that this in particular had happened. And I'm from Mississippi. Why isn't that I had to take Mississippi history in high school in order to graduate? I ended up not graduating because I had better things to do and dropped out. But I had to take an actual class called Mississippi history. Strangely enough, it didn't talk about this horrific black stain.
Didn't mention any of this, did it?
Concerning civil rights, the Mississippi Black Codes, and it's heartbreaking that Mississippi was the first one to do this, but not terribly surprising. They allowed freedmen to access the legal system, marry, own property, and contract employment, which is good, right? Positive steps, especially for Mississippi in that time. Now black people can get jobs, they can own property, they can get married, all good things.
Okay.
However, in the courts, blacks were limited from serving as witnesses in civil cases solely between white litigants. So if you had two white people suing each other, a black person could not act as a witness in that court. I don't know how often that came up, but it was demonstrably racist and it existed. Further, marriage between different races was punishable for both whites and non-whites by life imprisonment. I didn't know I didn't know that. I knew that it was frowned upon, but to pass an actual law forbidding interracial marriage, I didn't know that had happened.
And life in prison?
Yeah, the penalty definitely disproportionate. Well, if you're taking it from the context of being married is imprisonment for life, then I could get that. But obviously that's not what they mean. They mean they're putting people literally in prison. And the state prison in Mississippi is called Parchman, and it's a absolutely miserable place. Mississippi is exactly what you would expect it to be. Extremely high humidity, extremely high temperatures, and this is a swamp.
Yeah.
And that's where they put their prison. I think it's sort of it's just the delta and the swamp surrounding it. I've never actually been, obviously.
What's something that I'm sort of picking up on here is the theme is that governments perpetuate racism.
Yeah, well, they benefit from it. I don't know. Well, yes, so by definition, they would perpetuate it. But I don't want to put the blame entirely on governments. The government benefits from people being divided against one another.
That's true, yeah.
That's why the media is pushing this anti-trans, anti-drag nonsense to the extent that they are. Because the more you and I are fighting with each other, the less we're fighting with the actual problem,
Right.
which is the state. And this is a tactic going all the way back to like Mussolini.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah, this goes way back, and they know it. And racism is another one of these tactics that they use to keep us pitted against one another while they loot and rob and destroy and rape and pillage and plunder. So these limitations obviously made it extremely difficult to seek out better paying jobs or to change employment. And by doing this, it basically eliminated any true social mobility or autonomy. You couldn't climb the corporate ladder, so to speak, in Mississippi. For one, there wasn't a corporate ladder then, but it did all sorts of things. The limits were placed on their ability to own property outside of cities, so they couldn't own rural property, and to move from the cities and engage in their own farming or land ownership, similar to serfdom in medieval Europe, where you weren't allowed to go from one lord's farm to the next without that lord's permission. They had almost similar laws set up in Mississippi according to these black codes that, again, came out right after the Emancipation Proclamation, came out as a result of the Emancipation Proclamation.
If you needed a better illustration of how backwards it is to have rulers and to have governments telling you how to live your life, this is a very good illustration.
Further, under new apprenticeship laws, this is some of the more disgusting parts. Well, I don't know. It's been disgusting this whole time. I don't know how much worse it could get. County law enforcement and civil officials were required to report all free minors of black or mixed race who were orphans or whose parents were unable to provide financial care for them to the courts. And this may sound like a good thing. Hey, this kid's homeless, or this family can't feed this kid. We need to report this to the courts. That may sound noble and like a good thing. But first of all, it's never good to talk to the cops. No. Talking to the cops never makes anything better. Even if you think, oh, well, they're just going to go help this kid. Maybe they might actually do that. They might also show up and put a bullet in him. Right? There have been plenty of cases where cops responded. There was a 9-year-old autistic kid who was having a meltdown, and his mother didn't know how to respond to it at this point. I mean, he was out of control, and she had to do something. So she called the police, and the police showed up, and they put bullets in this kid. They killed this kid, this 9-year-old autistic kid. I want to say it was either 9-year-old or he was shot 9 times.
Yeah.
The number 9 is significant in that story, but it was a young kid, either way, that was killed for being autistic because someone called the police.
Well, we've done a number of stories here on Free Talk Live, 2 of them recently, actually, where someone has phoned the police to resolve some situation. One of them was a guy who thought he lives near the border. He thought some illegal immigrants were in his property, so he calls the cops.
Why the hell would anyone call the
cops? The cops show up and they kill the guy, not the immigrants, but the guy who called them.
I'm not in favor of that,
and
obviously.
then in a completely different state, something similar happened. A guy calls the cops because, he thought something was going on his property. The cops show up and they shoot the guy who called the cops.
Yeah, we covered one of those stories. Someone answered the door with a gun, and not even like pointed at the cops. They just had a gun because the cops were at the wrong address. Mm-hmm. The address that they were at was not the address on their warrant, and they were knocking and they were demanding entry. So this guy opened the door, not knowing it was the cops there. They also did not announce themselves as police, if I remember right, and they shot him and killed him. They went to his house, bothered him, knocked on his door, harassed him, and then murdered him. Yep. And they may have gotten a paid vacation, maybe even an unpaid vacation.
I'm sure they investigated themselves and found they did no wrong.
I'm sure they did. I don't even know how to begin addressing the police problem in the United States. When I ran for sheriff, of course, I ran on the platform of F the police, and I firmly stand by that slogan. And at one point, my car was vandalized. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, my signs were stolen throughout Cheshire County, but the one thing I did not do was call the police. Even though I made it clear to them, I'm an advocate of turning the other cheek. Yeah. So you stole my signs, fine. I'm going to turn the other cheek and just put more signs out there. But I've only got 2 cheeks. You slap both of them, and there are going to be repercussions. That was the statement that I put out there. So if any more of my signs went stolen, then the guy I had on video was going to get prosecuted. Right, so he needed prosecuted. So he needed to be out there convincing people not to steal my signs. But the one thing I didn't do during all of that, the cops came to me. They emailed me, incidentally, at aria@fpolice.com. That address no longer works, by the way. But they emailed me as hey, look, so someone reported this truck that was stealing your signs. This isn't part of your campaign, is it? I said, no, it's not. Then they followed up, well, do you want us to press charges? And I was like, no, just close the case and leave the person alone and leave me alone. Don't bother me again. Thank you. Have a good day. Because the police kill people. Even they've killed old ladies, pulling them over for having taillights out. Then, of course, there was the guy who walked through the hallway, had to play Simon Says with the officers because some busybody thought they saw a gun in his hotel room. And I don't even remember if he had a gun at this point. But he had to walk through the hallway while they were giving him various commands like cross your legs, put your hands on your head, put your hands on your hips, put your hands on your ankles, giving him literally mixed commands and then killing him when he was crying and begging for them to stop and trying to obey their contradictory commands.
Yeah, people need to and a lot of people, at least in the libertarian community, are pretty good at this. But I think more of regular people need to figure out how to mind your business.
Yes, if no one's being hurt, just look the other way.
Yeah, I mean, and part of the reason,
and I would add, if it's a corporation being hurt, just look the other way. If someone's stealing some laundry detergent from Walmart, just look the other way. I understand some libertarians will disagree on that.
Yeah. Part of the reason that I just even do this show is because I know that in order for myself to be free, everyone else must also be free. So for me to achieve the maximum amount of freedom possible, I need to be a champion for other people also being free.
Yes. So where we left off on this story with the black codes was that all civil officials, law enforcement, everyone who worked in any capacity for the government had to report to the courts anyone who they thought of black or mixed race, not anyone of white race, right? If they were white and they were starving, you didn't have to report them. But if they were black or mixed, you had to report them to the courts so that the courts could then order the minors to work as apprentices for individuals whom the courts deemed suitable and competent. So the courts would say, all right, well, here's a 10-year-old kid. His family can't feed him. All right. We're going to sentence him for existing and being black and poor in the South to forced labor working for this person who is literally now called his master because it's a master-apprentice relationship. So tell me what the hell changed with the emancipation? They just had to jump through more hoops to perpetuate the slavery that continued to exist and continues to exist to this day. Worse, this provision guaranteed that former slave owners had preference to ensure that the children of their former slaves would continue to labor for the master. So if you could show that this person had been your slave...
Generational servitude.
Yes. And if you could show to the court that this person had been your slave, the court would order that person to become your apprentice.
Yeah.
And this happened, people. This happened in the United States, in the state of Mississippi, and they probably weren't the only one. The article goes on. There's probably quite a bit more. But it happened in Mississippi, perpetuation of slavery that was not ended with the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth, I'm with you. Celebrate it. It's great. I'm glad slavery ended in that capacity. But it's so far from ended, and we can't end actual slavery. We can't address the problem until we acknowledge that it continues to exist.
Right, and then continue to acknowledge who the slave owner is.
Yes, because it's no longer an average white person, or it's no longer having anything to do with that.
It's an institution.
Yes, now it's the state.
Not just Thomas Jefferson anymore who owned slaves.
Right. So finally, criminal provisions restricted the types of property that black people could own, as well as the types of property that could be purchased by or sold to black Americans. Again, criminal penalties and jail time would often result in a freedman being hired out. And what this means by hired out is, again, being forced labor, because the 13th Amendment allowed them to be punished for any act with forced labor. So here we have laws that were placed preventing black people from owning certain types of property. And if they acquired those types of property, that would be a crime, and they would be sentenced to slavery for owning that property. So tell me again how slavery ended, or was hardly even impacted by the Emancipation Proclamation. It literally just changed forms, and only slightly at that. In response, eventually, Congress passed the 14th and 15th Amendments, the U.S. Congress, in 1868 and 1870. These amendments guaranteed freedmen equal protection under the law and the right to vote. it took a long time for those things to actually come into effect and to be useful to black Americans in the United States, because just because Congress said in 1870 that you as a black man could vote in Mississippi didn't mean that it was safe for you to go to the voting booth and vote in Mississippi, or that your ballot would even be counted.
It's so weird to me as a non-voter, right? Someone who does not give my scribe to these tyrants, right? That was the reward, right? Oh, congratulations, you get to participate in this thing. It's going to have no effect anyway.
Well, the myth is that it has an effect, and they get to choose their rulers, and that the myth sells. There's more coming up here from the Porcupine Freedom Festival. It is Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
Sometimes you have to do things in emergencies that you don't do in normal time.
Like lock up Japanese Americans?
Look, you don't believe in the internment of the Japanese Americans?
The hell I don't. I don't believe in locking somebody up for not doing anything wrong.
Let me tell you something. There were Japanese Americans who assisted Japanese soldiers in the Hawaiian Islands at that time.
So grab all the families and throw them in a concentration camp. That's a great solution, Lou. That's something that should happen in the land of the free, right?
See, I don't even like you using the term concentration
That's
camp.
what they were, Lou.
Because they were not death camps. They were.
It doesn't matter if there weren't gas chambers on the premises.
They were not death camps. You see, you're using euphemism.
I call them a concentration camp. You're concentrating people all in one location, Lou.
I don't, you're giving it an implication that it does not have.
I think you should go to the Japanese Americans and ask them, Lou.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. The US Coast Guard says people have to remain hopeful as the search for a submersible with 5 people aboard continues. Officials say underwater noises have been detected near the Titanic's wreck, where the small vessel disappeared. Gabrielle Fahmy reports.
The U.S. Coast Guard says it doesn't know what the noises are, but on Wednesday, several aircrafts heard banging sounds at 30-minute intervals. The good news, it says, is that allowed it to deploy even more resources to that area. This is a search and rescue operation. The 5 people on board are thought to have less than a day's worth of oxygen left, so time is of the essence. The vessel lost contact less than 2 hours into its dive in a remote part of the North Atlantic Sea. It was diving to the Titanic's wreck, which is about 700 kilometers south of the Canadian province of Newfoundland.
President Volodymyr Zelensky says reconstruction is key to restoring normal life in Ukraine, which will mark a real victory against Russia. He was remotely addressing the Ukraine Recovery Conference in London, which is seeking to find ways to build confidence in investing in the country.
The eyes of the world are looking at us and at whether we will defeat Russian aggression exactly as freedom deserves to win, that is without compromising our values. Also, the world is watching to see if we will restore normal life in such a way that our transformation will land an ideological defeat on the aggressor.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon has reported an accounting error that's led to the overvaluing of aid it provides to Ukraine. The military aid was overvalued by $6.2 billion over the past 2 years, and the Pentagon says this has resulted in a surplus that will be used for future security packages. India's Prime Minister is in the United States on his first state visit, the highest diplomatic protocol accorded by the US to visiting leaders. Narendra Modi is slated to hold talks with US President Joe Biden on Thursday, and experts say China is driving this Indo-US engagement. Nihar Punia has more on the defence deals that will likely be announced on this trip.
For the US, this visit is crucial from 2 points of view: weaning New Delhi away from its traditional defence partner Russia, and also equipping India to militarily counter China in the Indo-Pacific, which is why as many as 5 defence deals are likely to be announced. This includes India buying MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones from the US and a technology transfer that could allow India to manufacture GE's F414 jet engines locally. There's also talk of the countries jointly manufacturing armoured vehicles and ammunition.
At least 29 people have been hurt in an explosion in central Paris. Authorities say the cause of the explosion is still being investigated. From bureaus worldwide, this
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
Welcome back. It is Free Talk Live on this. You're probably listening on Wednesday. It's really hard to say, though. Although, hopefully, the Wednesday episode will actually be played on Wednesday, because Wednesday is She Talk Live, and we're going to be doing that tomorrow here at RV46. And we're going to be bringing Topless She Talk Live to the Porcupine Freedom Festival. This is something we haven't done in probably close to 2 years. Topless Tuesdays, of course, was a thing on Free Talk Live for years, and then I do Tuesday nights, so I started doing it topless, and I was like, well,
and then we got air conditioning.
What do you mean?
That was always Ian's reason for doing Topless Tuesday.
Well, there is air conditioning in there now, but I mean, it's more comfortable, right? So we started doing that on Tuesdays, and then I wanted to know how far we could push this, because I used to do a topless show called Aria Uncensored, and we got suspended from Twitch and YouTube and Facebook and all these other things for me doing that show, as we sort of expected to do. But for some reason, they backed off of that, and they're not suspending us on Tuesdays, and we started doing it on Wednesdays instead. Or on Wednesdays, we started doing She Talk Live, and then we started doing that show topless. Right. And it was tremendously successful, as you might imagine. Viewership skyrocketed, knowing that, Nikki and Angie and others were sitting there in my studio at that time being topless.
Now that's how you advertise.
It was tremendously successful. And that's happening here at RV46 tomorrow. So come hang out with us for that. There are a few people coming, I know, just to spectate, that women who support the idea, because I've already seen men running around topless all over the place today. Yeah, it's common.
Apparently it's called Top Freedom.
Is it?
Yeah, I ran across it while I was, researching anarchism, as one does, and ran across Top Freedom, and I'm like, what's as in topless. Right.
Makes sense.
There ought to be free the nipple. There ought to actually be equality between the sexes as far as what we expect clothing wise.
I agree entirely, because I grew up as a male, obviously, and I spent most of my youth being topless, because it's Mississippi, guys. Everyone walking around Mississippi is topless because it's 140 degrees with a 96% humidity. And I just sort of am accustomed to that. Most women are never going to know how comfortable it actually is, how liberating, how relaxing it actually is to just be able to walk around topless.
Yeah.
And part of She Talk Live is aimed at normalizing that and getting people accustomed to it. And it's been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to its return tomorrow here at... It's actually never been here at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. There is a nude village, a nude camp somewhere around here. I don't know exactly where. I haven't been to it.
The Body Freedom people.
Yes, that's it, the Body Freedom Village.
The same thing where, if it becomes normalized, it becomes normalized. Like, when you've grown accustomed to nudity in a non-emergency and non-sexualized context, then it just becomes something that you overlook completely.
Right. I mean, it's conditioning and training that causes us to sexualize nudity in the first place. But the Body Freedom people, they keep their body freedom at the Body Freedom Village. Mm-hmm. We're not doing that. We're doing it right here, right at Agora Valley, here on RV46. So I expect some amount of controversy, but we're only being topless. And there's all sorts of good reasons why we should be allowed to sit here and be topless. And I don't really expect much pushback, but I do expect some. And that's happening more. So come hang out with us for that. But I'm sorry to do all of that and have that, 3.5 minute long preamble there to bring us back into the show, because we do have a guest here. That's one of the things we like to do here on Free Talk Live at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, is we get people on here to talk about their projects they're doing, what they're doing to make the world freer in their lifetime. Because that's the goal. We all want freedom in our lifetime, and one of the reasons Mark Edge isn't here is because he's out there gallivanting around the world trying to acquire freedom in his lifetime. And Tony Olson here is with the Freedom Haven Project. So tell me about this. Give me a brief overview exactly. What is the Freedom Haven Project?
The Freedom Haven Project will be bringing the free market to the world's 25 million refugees. We're creating an anarcho-capitalist floating port city outside the jurisdiction of all existing governments.
Okay, so is it a seasteading project, essentially?
It's seasteading, except that most seasteading projects are more about fancy homes on the beach or just off the beach, as opposed to actually going out beyond the jurisdiction of government.
Okay, so you're trying to like have a seastead effectively, but
Yes.
in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or
Exactly.
the Atlantic Ocean. All right, so how is that going? I mean, what's it looking like? It seems like that's a monumental task, right? That's
It
a
is.
huge project to have a floating city,
Yes.
basically.
Yes, we plan. If we're continuing on the same course we're on right now, we should have it built by 2037. That's a long way out.
It is,
but it is a big project.
So, how do you intend to keep from running afoul of the many mafias known as nation states?
Oh, yes.
Because they tend to like getting a cut of everything.
Oh yes, they do. This is where it gets really, really tricky. We will have to, if you're not actually flying a flag of some nation, then you're considered a pirate vessel, and all the countries agree that they can basically seize your vessel. So we can't go out there without a flag.
Right.
So we will have to have a flag of convenience, but we're going to play the game, and those laws that those flags have means that there's some regulation on the crew, some regulations on the ship, but no regulations on the passengers. So basically, yes, the ship and we maintain a ship will actually have some kind of rules with it, like how we handle oil. We'll have to have certain controls and certain things we have to keep up with regulations. But the passengers will have full economic freedom and social freedom.
I think I understand here. It's sort of like how the captain of a plane is a citizen of whatever country that is, but that doesn't mean that you're a citizen of that country when you're on that plane.
Exactly.
And here, you would be an independent citizen or not a citizen of, let's say you'd announce your American citizenship, then you're the captain, the people working on this vessel, or however you would characterize them, are still subject to whatever laws of the countries they're from.
Yep.
But you, as the passenger, would be free.
And actually, there are very few laws. Most laws, by default, do not apply outside the jurisdiction, outside the exclusive economic zone. Those laws that they pass, all the federal laws here, unless they specifically specify that it goes out on the ocean, it doesn't. It's just here for on land. So
how common is this? Because I know we heard a story, I want to say last year, of some Asian country, may have been Vietnam or South Korea. Thailand. They encountered one of these seasteads. The people happened to be ashore at the time.
Chad and Nadia.
But they raided it. And I don't remember what all of the details were, but did they do that on just the justification of, oh, this is a pirate ship? Because that's insane. And you can't. It's insane. I'm not surprised nations do this, but it's insane to treat every unflagged vessel as a privateer, as a pirate, as a threat.
There are two things there. One is they didn't have a flag, and the second one is they were actually inside the jurisdiction. They're not outside the jurisdiction. They're about 15, 20 miles offshore, and this is where it gets tricky because they said, oh, we're in international waters. But the international law does not define international waters. So sometimes they say it's 12 nautical miles, sometimes they say it's 200 nautical miles. But because it's not defined, we should not ever use the term international waters because if you're inside the exclusive economic zone, 200 nautical miles from shore, you're in their jurisdiction. One way or another, they can control everything that happens. They can take your ship. They can regulate you.
I can see that. It's sort of like how it doesn't matter what China claims as its territorial waters or what there's disagreement, and China is the example that comes to mind. And I don't know how
it doesn't matter to the U.S. what China claims as its territorial waters, or to China what the U.S. claims as its territorial waters.
Well,
but
China
if someone claims 200 miles from their shore, you better believe that they're going to come stealing.
Well, China claims significantly more territorial water than like anyone else is willing to recognize.
The Southern Line map or whatever.
Yeah, and that's why they come to mind where this is happening, because there is no international. They're saying that's not international water. That's Chinese water.
And that's specifically why Thailand is so sensitive on this subject and why they took their ship. Is because that was Thailand, and Thailand shares another border with the South China Sea where a lot of this contention is happening.
Okay, so I can see that. It seems like that would be a bad area then to do this seasteading. So the Atlantic Ocean might be safer, but I don't know. It's all very risky, and there's nothing that's guaranteed. There's nothing that's safe when you're trying to get away from the jurisdictions of the governments around the world. I love the seasteading possibility. My issue, it's not really an issue, but I don't have the pioneering spirit like that. I don't feel like that's for me. Like Mark Edge is doing a bunch of different projects, and he describes basically a cubby hole down there in the Honduras somewhere where people can live, and it's only $150 a month. Yeah, and it's like the size of the bathroom here in the motel room at Rogers Campground, and it's got about the same amenities except half the good running water, and then you don't want to drink that water,
which is frequently part of the pioneering spirit. That's right.
Doesn't
Pack
sound
your entire life into a covered wagon.
And of course,
like fun.
Mark is always promoting these ideas, and a few nights ago we just had a beautiful conversation with him where we got him to say, no, of course not. I wouldn't take my kid and go live in this little closet in the Honduras. That's crazy. It's like, yeah, thank you, Mark. You've been saying, you finally said what we've been saying for years, which is why we promote the Free State Project and moving to New Hampshire, where you can have these amenities like electricity, heat, water, internet, and other little things like that he doesn't necessarily have down there in Honduras. But we're less free than he is, demonstrably less free, and that's always going to be the case. The seasteading idea, and Mark's little project on that. I say little project. I don't mean to talk down about it. But Mark's project in the Honduras, he's got two of them. They both require the agreement of the Honduran government to honor its agreement to allow them to have their ZA, their special economic zone that is distinct, and to not violate that agreement. And they're already trying to violate that agreement, obviously. Mark thinks they can win that in court, but...
And to be fair, we do need the United States' agreement to exist here, because they do like to kill things that they don't like. And they have pretty much declared us as one of their enemies, even libertarians on the list of detestable figures. At least we know here that we are working toward not having those problems, that we are working towards secession, and that there's a real possible path forward with that. Whereas with Honduras, I mean, there's no telling how long the communists will be in charge of the national government.
Right, and all of that's in theory, right? That's the goal, but... Some people like Mark. Mark wants liberty in his lifetime, and for Mark, it's a for Mark, it's a very personal thing. He doesn't care about my liberty or your liberty, and to be fair, he cares about my liberty because he cares about me and I'm his friend. But in general, he doesn't care about everyone else's freedom. And that's where we diverge from him. That's where Ian and I diverge from him, because I want everyone to be free. Yes, it would be great if I could just pay the American government $5 million and they'll leave me alone for the rest of my life. That would be fantastic. But it doesn't do anything to help anyone else. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm motivated by a desire to help others. And that's why I like these sorts of projects being put forward and being propagated by people, because we can make each other free, the people who want freedom. And seasteading and this Honduras project, these special economic zones, seem like good ways of doing that. But Mark's projects require the government to keep its word. And I
wouldn't trust that as far as I could throw it.
No, I remember what happened to the Native Americans when they trusted the American government to keep its word, and I can't think of any scenario where they don't even obey the freaking Constitution. Why would they obey this other law?
Yep.
Well, and honestly, I do wonder the same thing about your project. So, like, whose flag is your ship going to be flying? Because you are kind of trusting that government to, not suddenly change the deal on you. I have altered the deal. Pray I do not alter it further. Right. Exactly. So, I mean, that's kind of the relationship you have with whoever's flag you're flying.
Yeah, that's actually one of the countries, the most common flag being used for flag inconvenience out there is the Panama flag. But we're actually probably considering the second most convenient one, which is the Liberian flag. Liberia is a terrible country to live in. It has a very low level of freedom, but they're constantly in civil war. And they're constantly fighting among themselves.
Well, that's convenient.
Yeah, and so you never know who's going to charge whatever. And they've actually delegated their flag registry to a company in Virginia that handles all of that. And that flag registry does nothing more than just say, okay, you want to be a member? Here's all the information. Okay, you're registered now, and I pay them their fee, and they pay back like a quarter of it back to Liberia, keep the rest, and 10% of it goes to some humanitarian fund there. But basically, long story short, Liberia isn't even involved. They just get free money.
Well, and Liberia, if I remember correctly, has basically been the United States' sort of pet project. So it's one of those, like, people will probably respect
no wonder
your
it's broken.
space. Right. People will probably respect your space so that they don't get on the bad side of the U.S., but there's not that much government to actually oppress you because it keeps ending up in civil war.
Exactly.
So I don't want to drag this too far out into the weeds, but I'm curious, and you seem like you may know the answer to this. What is the process for these other nations recognizing another flag as legitimately belonging to a nation state? Like, there's a flag flying right here, and the LGBT flag. And I would imagine that flying that flag wouldn't do me any good as far as affording me protection from the Thailand government.
In the UK, there's the International Maritime Organization that actually keeps track of...
I should have known. Of course, there's a bureaucracy.
Oh, right. It's a bureaucracy. Of course, they have an organization.
They have a list of all the flags that they recognize. Now, there might be other flags that other countries recognize, and there might be flags on that registry that other countries say, well, I don't recognize it. So there's, but you start with that. You want to work with them and help them recognize your country officially, which means going through all the ugly channels of getting the UN to recognize you and working with other countries saying they recognize us. It's going to be a long process, so we'll be the Liberian flag for a while until that happens.
Well, I hope that works out. It sounds like it actually could. I was heartbroken to hear about the failure. I don't want to call it a failure, but what happened to the seasteading project that you mentioned. You mentioned their names, and I don't remember what they were, but that was tragic, right? It was just these people trying to live freely, not hurting anyone. There's seasteading projects here every year. We usually get them on some of the hexagonal-shaped ones that sort of connect together. These are fantastic, very dreamy sort of projects. And what I mean by that is it takes big dreams to get into something like this. Like Ernie Hancock down here, who does the show Declare Your Independence, he dreams of a spaceship that we can use to set ourselves free. And I'm actually 100% with them on that note. I don't think that human beings will achieve a libertarian society until we're colonizing other planets, at which point we'll be so far, we can take our libertarians to some colony, and we'll be so far from the government that they just won't be able to enforce their laws on us. So I'm totally with them on that, but it sounds crazy when I say it to people, and they laugh and they go, "Ha yeah, spaceships." But I mean, it's going to happen.
It's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
For me, it's just a question of how much it costs. I mean, I think land is the cheapest, ocean's the more expensive, the moon would be even more expensive, the Mars would be even more expensive. But like that's why on ships you live in cabins instead of big spacious housing. But the cost of living on what we have planned here, we estimate that we can probably get that cost down for people willing to live like they do in the Navy, where you have like multiple bunks.
Yeah,
$5,000 a year per person. That's cheap.
I mean, yeah, it is, but it doesn't sound like the way that I would really want to live. But I don't have that pioneering
I'd be living
spirit.
at about the $30,000-$40,000 level, which is having multiple things and living the way I live right now.
Okay, and that they do have those options available for people. Presumably, if you can drop the money on it, you can have your own room, so to speak, on one of these.
Yeah, one of these
seasteads.
A full room in the New Liberty vessel that we're creating right now. If you're an investor and you're paying up front, that's $65,000 for 10 years of that room. And then you can either have that for yourself, or you can rent it out to other people, and then get your return on investment in 7 years.
So it's sort of a floating condo situation.
Very much. And what we're essentially doing is nothing more than providing land or place to build your libertarian society outside the jurisdiction of government. We're essentially putting land out there where there isn't land right now. Mm-hmm. So in essence, it's kind of just real estate.
Yeah, that was one of the strangest things that China did when it built an artificial island for the exact purpose of making sure that more of this sea area, which, I mean, it's the only thing that we have left is space on the sea and under the sea as far as frontiers go, because every square inch of land is claimed by at least one government.
Yep.
But, realistically, that's most of the space available on the planet.
Right.
The oceans are fairly deep, and in theory, if we develop a way to live down there, it probably wouldn't be very pleasant. But if we can put a colony on the moon, we can put a colony at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
Exactly.
I don't see any reason why we can't. I don't know that I would want to live down there because and that's not even about the pioneering spirit, it's because I'm claustrophobic. And I think that would drive me insane very, very quickly. Like my father, he wanted to go into the military and he wanted to work on a submarine. And I just can't understand the mentality of someone who wants to be in a submarine and that narrow confined space. But yeah, the bottom of the ocean, to say nothing of the surface of the ocean, where there's presumably plenty of sunlight and you could have some arable land on there. There's plenty of possibilities. The only thing, as you mentioned, really holding things back is the money. And and in the libertarian community around the world, there's plenty of people with the money to back up some of these projects.
And also the mindset. A lot of people, when you talk about living on the ocean, they imagine water world and some raft out there, fighting the waves in the storm. What we're talking about is for those few people who have actually been on those mega cruise ships, those modern ones, where you play pool and occasionally the pool ball veers just a little bit, and you're like, why does it do that? Why didn't it go straight? Oh yeah, I'm on a ship in the middle of the ocean. Or you have the wine test where you have a glass of wine on the table and it doesn't spill, it doesn't even shake, because that's how stable the ship is. You forget that you're on the water. They have swimming lessons for people on these cruise ships because swimming is optional.
Yeah, if I was going to get on a cruise ship, I would want to make sure I could swim.
I would too, but that's the whole point. Is you're so disconnected from the nature that they've already tamed that frontier. They just haven't. We just haven't opened our minds and seen the potential that frontier has for us.
I've seen some of the images that people have of these ships. I don't know if that would be the correct term for them or not, but yeah, the engineering that goes into them is phenomenal. It's not at all what you would expect from some of these things, like the hexagonal ones that I was talking about. They extend down into the sea. It's basically dropping an anchor for several dozens of feet, and it's solid still, and it keeps the ship steady.
A spar, yeah, those are really cool.
Yeah, and these things, they work. The technology's there. You could test this at home using a bowling pin and something else to stab it down into the water.
Yep.
This technology's there. It's feasible. It's practical. The only thing we need, really, as you mentioned, is money and for people to have the right mindset. Because it's a big world, but there are countless possibilities out there. Like Ernie likes the spaceship idea. I think that's probably the most likely to actually happen. Or which by that I mean I think it's any of these could happen, but I think the spaceship one, the future libertarian
societies, it's most likely to get far enough away from the government so the government doesn't come after you and take away your freedom once you're out there.
Well, I think it's almost a certainty that something like that is going to happen at some point, that we're going to have some libertarian space colony. But libertarian seastead, that doesn't feel like it's a more natural progression.
It's not far enough away.
But it's possible, right? And I love these sorts of projects. So where can people go if they want to learn more about this? And how close are you to having one of these out there with people like on it living there?
You can go to freedomhaven.org, freedomhaven.org. And we're taking this in 4 phases. The first phase was actually come up with the plan, all the details and so forth. The second phase right now is the exploratory campaign, where we're actually going out there to see, is this even economically viable? We know that if we had enough money, we could build it tomorrow. Is there enough interest? Is there enough people out there that actually would want this to happen? And that's where we're right now. That's where we're in phase 2, and it's marketing phase. And then phase 3, we actually get the designers, like Samsung Heavy Industries, the actual people from the shipyards to actually do the professional designs down to each rivet. And then phase 4 is the actual building the ship, and then we start the whole process. 2037 is when all 4 of those phases will be complete. Each phase is about 4 years. Okay. We're in the middle of phase 2 right now.
So this is a sort of subscription service where someone would have to pay like yearly or by the decade or whatever in order to maintain their space on here, which would necessitate in many ways some ability to earn money. And this is one of the criticisms I have with Mark. Mark thinks, well, you can just work online, right? And that's true for some people, but it's not necessarily true for everyone. Some people's jobs just don't do that. But yes, but being able to do that, if someone could do that, if they have a job that supports that, it's going to require pretty solid internet access. And I don't want to focus too much on the internet addiction that people have, but it is important for a person to sustain themselves to have connectivity to the rest of the world. Or is this project only for people who are already wealthy and can subsist indefinitely?
No. If you're already wealthy, you already have the MS World that Ian mentioned last time, which is one that $10 million per cabin. You have other wealthy cruise ship options. You can live in a cruise ship right now today, although you don't have freedom. You still can live out in the sea for $80,000 a year per person and up. But that's still too expensive for me. We're trying to keep this as cheap as possible.
Okay, very cool. So that's freedomhaven.org, you said?
Yep, freedomhaven.org.
freedomhaven.org to learn more about this. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Tony. There is more coming up, more people to talk to here at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. It is Free Talk Live.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government is completely involuntary. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, Mark at freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
The latest episode of Free Talk Live continues with Hour 3 up next after the news here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. The US Coast Guard says people have to remain hopeful as the search for a submersible with 5 people aboard continues. Officials say underwater noises have been detected near the Titanic's wreck, where the small vessel disappeared. Gabrielle Fahmy reports.
The U.S. Coast Guard says it doesn't know what the noises are, but on Wednesday, several aircrafts heard banging sounds at 30-minute intervals. The good news, it says, is that allowed it to deploy even more resources to that area. This is a search and rescue operation. The 5 people on board are thought to have less than a day's worth of oxygen left, so time is of the essence. The vessel lost contact less than 2 hours into its dive in a remote part of the North Atlantic Sea. It was diving to the Titanic's wreck, which is about 700 kilometers south of the Canadian province of Newfoundland.
President Volodymyr Zelensky says reconstruction is key to restoring normal life in Ukraine, which will mark a real victory against Russia. He was remotely addressing the Ukraine Recovery Conference in London, which is seeking to find ways to build confidence in investing in the country.
The eyes of the world are looking at us and at whether we will defeat Russian aggression exactly as freedom deserves to win, that is without compromising our values. Also, the world is watching to see if we will restore normal life in such a way that our transformation will land an ideological defeat on the aggressor.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon has reported an accounting error that's led to the overvaluing of aid it provides to Ukraine. The military aid was overvalued by $6.2 billion over the past 2 years, and the Pentagon says this has resulted in a surplus that will be used for future security packages. India's Prime Minister is in the United States on his first state visit, the highest diplomatic protocol accorded by the US to visiting leaders. Narendra Modi is slated to hold talks with US President Joe Biden on Thursday, and experts say China is driving this Indo-US engagement. Nihar Punia has more on the defence deals that will likely be announced on this trip.
For the US, this visit is crucial from 2 points of view, weaning New Delhi away from its traditional defence partner Russia and also equipping India to militarily counter China in the Indo-Pacific, which is why as many as 5 defence deals are likely to be announced. This includes India buying MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones from the US and a technology transfer that could allow India to manufacture GE's F414 jet engines locally. There's also talk of the countries jointly manufacturing armoured vehicles and ammunition.
At least 29 people have been hurt in an explosion in central Paris. Authorities say the cause of the explosion is still being investigated. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more detail today at the safety of deep-sea submersibles like the one that went missing in the Atlantic, with 5 people aboard hoping to see the wreck of the Titanic. It's been pointed out this week that more human beings have flown in space than have explored the deepest areas of the world's oceans. But as the plight of the Ocean Gate Expedition submersible has illustrated, it is a deeply hazardous endeavour. Jared Hill, senior reporter with CBS News, has more.
It has had a number of successful journeys down to the Titanic and down in that area. But again, they do repeatedly say that this is a dangerous mission. We do know that there have been some questions raised even by a CBS News correspondent who took one of these trips, who was looking at the vessel itself and looking at some of the capabilities. And he was raising questions about, this maybe doesn't seem the most sophisticated. This is not a massive submarine that some people may be thinking about. This is about the size of a minivan. There is not a huge stash of food or water. So this is a vessel that is designed for these types of quick exploratory trips.
There are only 5 countries with submersibles capable of taking humans to some of the lowest depths on the planet, and this week's events will lead to a fresh focus on their safety. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
FSN is an independent source of news for TV, radio and digital networks worldwide. You can find more of our minute-by-minute updates on Twitter. Follow us there at Feature Story. And we have a wealth of audio and video stories from our global news bureaus on Facebook. You can find us there by following Feature Story News. Stay tuned for further updates right here. But for now, that's the latest Feature Story News. William Denzelo reports.
An alarming UN report on magical realism released this week warns of increased incidences of women's tears flooding the entire world. A UN committee linked the catastrophic phenomena to matronly widows, commonly named Tita and Esmeralda, who wept for up to 90 days on end about their estranged lovers.
Just consider how detrimental it is to a nation's workforces to have thousands of its plantation overseers simply disappear one night into the midsummer fog, only to return decades later without having aged a single day. Put simply, if such phenomena are not immediately halted, the effects on the international community will be catastrophic.
The nation's limo drivers spent a magical prom night playing scratch-off tickets in the parking lot this week. According to sources, chauffeurs nationwide began their enchanting evening by cramming swank magazines into their glove compartments before dropping off their students at a school gym, working through a stunning assortment of lotto cards, and dining upon a wide range of microwave-heated taquitos from a nearby 7-Eleven.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. We are here at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. It continues to be an absolutely beautiful day. That tends to be the case here in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Yesterday, I don't know if you saw it, but as the sun was setting, there appeared to be a sort of gold band across the sky. I actually did not see it, but it was reported to me by Dennis Pratt, who was the organizer of this year's Porcupine Freedom Festival. So I didn't see that exact myself. I did see the sunset because I was, walking my dog out around that time, and it was just gorgeous, beautiful landscape up here. It's hard to go wrong. The only way it could be better is with DMT. And It was a few years ago that I sat at the bowl over there with Ian and doing DMT and watching the landscape, and difficult to describe experience.
The only way these sunsets could be improved is if they had colors that don't actually exist.
Yes, exactly that. And it did make everything more beautiful, and it was a DMT experience. So it was exactly what you would expect it to be. But that's the only way to improve the absolutely gorgeous vistas here in the White Mountains.
For sure.
And I was worried it was going to be raining all week. That so far has not been the case. But I'm not a weather person. I'm not going to give you a weather report. Get here, RV 46, because tomorrow is going to be a day to remember.
That's a fact.
And also, update, we mentioned the Rant Festival, the Soapbox Idol that happens every year at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. We weren't sure if I was going to be a judge. I had assumed I was going to be a judge, so I will indeed be judging this year's event again, so I'm looking forward to that. That's always my favorite part of the festival. It's just hearing libertarians passionate about a subject, ranting about a thing. And again, a reminder, I want passionate libertarians. I don't want you to go up there and give me a 3-minute dissertation on economics or the history of or what Mises had to say about this. No, I want passion. I want fire. Bring it. That's the kind of thing. Also, I want cider. Bring me cider, and I will give you more points. I'm thinking of announcing at the beginning, like before we even start this year, like I have a bribery skill, right? You bring me an Angry Orchard cider, you get 2 extra points. You bring me a cider of any sort of description, you get 1 point. You bring me shrooms, you get 3 points, and so on. So the beautiful thing about it is I can give these people whatever points I want. No one cares. No one's in charge. We're just doing this crazy little thing. And the points don't matter. At the end, the judges, we sit around and we go, well, who did we want to win? And I mean, we don't measure it by the point. We don't tally up the points. So I can give you 1,000,000 points, and it won't mean that you're going to win. So you can bribe me as much as you want. Just dump a whole bag of psilocybin cubensis on the table if you want. I can give you 10 million points. And obviously, I'm not doing psilocybin cubensis. I don't have the mental capacity right now to do any sorts. I can't even drink without having anxiety attacks. And that's an unusual experience for me, but it's because I'm going to prison in like a week. So my mental state isn't there, and doing shrooms or LSD would be just a terrible idea for me right now.
Yeah, there's an old saying. It's get your mind. What is it? State of mind and your what is it? State and anyway. If you're going to experiment with a mind-opening substance, you have to make sure that you're in the right mind state and that you are in the right place.
Yes.
And this is a beautiful place, but I mean, when you are being put into a torture cell for, oh no, you sold people cryptocurrency that they wanted. How dare you?
Yeah, dastardly crime of selling Bitcoin. But Peakless and I are joined by Kahuna. Welcome to the show. I think this is the first time you've been on during the Porcupine Freedom Festival, isn't it?
During Porcfest, yeah. I was here last year during Forkfest. But this
That's right.
First Porcfest experience.
Oh, really? So how
set and setting, that's the old saying.
Yeah.
Set and setting. Well, I mean, yeah, and there's something to be said about using psychedelics to put yourself in the correct mindset to deal with those sorts of things, but that's not going to work in this case, right? I can't shroom my way out of the anxiety of going to prison next week.
Right.
So I'm not even going to attempt it. I would not attempt to do the shrooms even if I had them because it's not worth it to me. There's no way I could possibly have a good trip.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the difference between what they're useful for and not useful for. They're useful for when you shouldn't have anxiety, but you do. And you just cannot get rid of that, and you've tried this and that. Okay, those are great situations for let's tap into the deepest layer of learning in your brain and fix that. Whereas you actually have a reason for your anxiety. Like you are facing down a predator. You're supposed to feel anxious when you face down a predator.
Fair enough. Survival mechanism, all of that. So this is your first Porcupine Freedom Festival. This is day 2. It's still, well, for us, it's day 2. For you out there, listener, it's probably Wednesday or Thursday. I don't know. But it is Tuesday for us. So the festival is still getting going. People are still setting up. It's still in the early days. It's a very different festival than what we'll see Friday and Saturday. But what are your impressions so far, being this is your first time attending?
I like it. I mean, I like seeing all the people here. It is more structured than Forkfest, so that's different.
Yeah.
But it's great to look around and see so many people here, celebrating freedom, enjoying New Hampshire, getting that whole experience.
That's always been one of my favorite things about New Hampshire is the Porcupine Freedom Festival and just all of the different things that you can see happening and see people doing, and the vending. The vending this year has been fantastic. And that's something that Forkfest has always sort of lacked.
And I also like seeing all the younger people here, the kids, starting them early, enjoying New Hampshire. I was at breakfast this morning, one of the vendors, and there were two gentlemen. They had their two daughters, and it was just a great thing to see.
I wish I had woke up in time to have breakfast because I've been wanting like a sausage and biscuit and some eggs. I really want some eggs, but there's no kitchen space in the motel rooms here at Rogers Campground. There's no suite where I can get access to a kitchen or whatever. I suppose in theory I could grill some eggs, but that's a lot of work, right? When I would have to set up a campfire here and get the thing with which to do it and go buy the skillets and the eggs and all that. It would be better if I could just find someone cooking those things and buy theirs.
And it was also awesome. I paid for breakfast with Goldbacks.
Yes, that's the best part by far of the Porcupine Freedom Festival is being able to live in and thrive in an economy that doesn't rely on the U.S. dollar. And you can use the U.S. dollar here, but you could survive the entire week just using Goldbacks or cryptocurrency or some combination thereof. For the most part, you could barter and get by just fine. Even if you don't have gold and silver, if you have something someone else wants, they're more than willing to trade for it. I got a tarot reading yesterday. I think this is the first time we've had I don't know if she's a psychic, but we've had tarot readings here that I've ever seen right here in Agora Valley, and I paid 2 Goldbacks for it, and she was willing to barter with whatever one happened to have, and that's something that you find a lot at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. There's a lot of set your own price too, which can be a bit jarring for me when, like a few nights ago, the Cordons were doing dinner, and it was a donation only sort of thing. It's like, okay, but what do you want? What do you think is fair? Tell me that. But it's amazing here. We accept Goldback here, stickers everywhere. I love seeing those.
It's so hard to figure out how things are priced when they're printing the money at the rate that they are these days. So yeah, there's a bunch of people, including myself, trying to outsource the labor of figuring out, okay, what is this worth now?
Really good point.
And there was a price on the sign where I had breakfast in dollars, but I paid. They said they take Goldbacks, so they take crypto.
And that is.
Did they also price it in Goldbacks on the sign?
No.
Okay. I was the first person to ever do that.
Not this particular vendor, but I actually gave this person more in quote value in Goldbacks just to show my support and because I wanted to.
Right.
Nice.
It's not because I had to, but I wanted to just provide that support.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we are going to see for a very long time to come. Even if gold or cryptocurrency takes over, there's going to be a long period of time where things are still priced in dollars, even while that tanks. But to see, here's what it looks like, everyone. Here's what a U.S. dollar threat and coercion currency can be free of. This is what it looks like.
Yes, and this is what society looks like when it's running on those currencies. The only qualm I have is with people who don't put the price in Goldbacks on their signs, because I can't use cryptocurrency, so I can use U.S. dollar and Goldbacks. Of the two, I vastly prefer using Goldbacks. And it can be tricky when my order is $26 to pay for it in Goldbacks. Now, it's just some simple math, right? It's 7 Goldbacks in that case because each one is worth about $4. And we all tend to round down. I think the price is technically like $4.07 right now. But if somebody buys something that requires 10 Goldbacks and you treat that as $40.70, you're the outlier. Everyone else is just rounding down to $4. Right. And so don't be that weirdo who's charging charging people that extra 7 cents or whatever, right?
Yeah, there's a I forget which country they're from. There's this Middle Eastern shop in Manchester that got talked into taking goldbacks, and I'm always jarred by the fact that they like look up online. Wait a second, how much is the gold worth right now? Okay, here's your charge for that.
The Funky Noodle did that as well. Now, this restaurant you mentioned, are they giving you like goldback prices of the goldback? Are they looking up the goldback prices, or are they treating it like 1/1000th of an ounce of gold?
They're looking up the goldback prices.
Okay,
yeah.
that's good. That's good. So they're valuing the utility of it, because the actual value of the gold in a goldback is about $2.50, something around that area.
Well, and the thing that we're really tapping into here is, are you willing to save? Because that's what gold and cryptocurrency are good for. Yeah, they may not be as convenient to take in and give away just as quickly as possible, but they're what you can save in and really have something you know will work.
Yeah, we have paper for something to trade freely and to get rid of and to not save. But gold is certainly useful for that, and the goldback made gold useful, whereas previously you would have to, I can't even imagine how small 1,000th of an ounce of gold would be. To carry around $4 worth of gold, I would absolutely, for sure, lose it. But with the goldback, that's not a problem. And that's a beautiful thing. I do find silver to be slightly more, the only criticism I have of the goldback is that you cannot melt it down, you cannot smelt it to get the raw gold out of it. That can only be done through a very specific process, basically by undoing the process they did initially to make them. So if I take one of my 50 goldbacks, which is a 20th of an ounce of gold, I would expect to be able to melt it down and get a 20th of an ounce of gold out of it. But that's not the way it works. In order to get that gold, they have to do something, and that's the part
really
that
surprising.
saddens
You'd think
me.
that you could like take a stack of these and just apply enough heat that you burn off the plastic in them, and you'd be left with gold.
You would expect so, but as I understand it from the goldback people, that is not the case.
And it's probably not a simple process, so there's a cost to that, which is probably not small.
Yeah.
So that dilutes, if you will, the net value of that melted gold.
But I do love the goldback, and I don't mean to tarnish it in any way whatsoever. It's absolutely useful. It made gold useful, but for that reason alone, I prefer the actual silver. On the subject of silver, have either of you seen Silver Dave this year?
I haven't.
I have not.
He's surely here. He's normally right there along Agora Valley with his gourmet food. Fantastic. Expensive.
I have not met him yet. I do want to meet him, so hopefully I run into him in the next few days.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know he's still selling silver, so I don't know why I haven't seen him.
I'm going to have to put out the word to see if he's here, if he's coming this year, because he every year he does gourmet dinners, and it's hard to find gourmet food here at, it's fair food, and that's sort of what you expect. The closest consistent thing we have to gourmet food is Little Zoe's, the pizza shop down here. Everything else is just pretty much is fair food, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Silver Dave offered actual gourmet, last year he did ahi tuna and some other
delicious.
stuff, and it was like $35 for a plate, but it was
9
delicious.
Goldbacks.
Yeah,
right.
And it was worth it, and it was something you could eat and feel good about having eaten. Whereas last night I mentioned previously, I got some of the loaded fries and split them with my dog. I didn't feel good about eating that. This is just food that is, I'm eating because I'm hungry. It's not healthy. It's not good. But Little Zoe's
more like fuel than food.
Yes.
Yep.
Little Zoe's has salads this year, and I don't believe they did that last year. So I'm happy to see that. A lot of positive changes this year from last year. By and large, it's still the Porcupine Freedom Festival. I don't notice any huge, major changes, but there's a lot of little subtle ones among the people like that. And it could also just be a difference in perspective. Maybe Little Zoe's always had salads, and I just didn't notice.
Well, I've definitely noticed a lot of Massachusetts license plates this year, and I think,
Really?
I think a lot of people are here to see their Kennedy.
Oh man, I hope not. I look again. I don't think RFK should be banned, but I wish he would just F off. And it's so hard. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Look, someone is reminding the people on the left that they used to hate war and distrust the pharmaceutical companies.
Okay, when I say F off, I mean from Porcfest and from libertarian circles. I do not mean in general. I don't care what he does with Democrats and liberals, right? Yeah. I don't want already libertarians, in an effort to chase after that clout that is mainstream recognition and the ego boost of feeling like we're significant and that we matter to the political parties, already they're willing to bend their knee and to give in to RFK's demands. When the exact opposite should be the case. RFK wants our vote. He wants our vote.
If
so
my
what,
uncle's head exploded from something, I'd feel a little bit iffy about having those things around.
That's a non sequitur, in my opinion. I mean, he's probably been around guns. He's got armed guards coming here with him, right? He's not going to be around guns. He just wants to be able to control who has the guns.
And it's going to be a gun-free zone, I believe.
At the pavilion. Well, no. No. His guys will be able to have guns.
Other than his guys?
Well, see, that's a critical distinction because it's not a gun-free zone.
Okay.
It's a gun-free zone for us ordinary people. His elite soldiers, his bodyguards get to have guns, and we're at their mercy. And just extrapolate that to the wider society, you have the same problem. Well, only the police should have guns. And he just exemplifies that exact mindset. And I don't think that the fact that his uncle got killed, or his uncles, I don't remember exactly how many of them have been killed, got killed, gives him any sort of political credibility. And that's what I encounter a lot. It's like, well, he says there was a conspiracy and it is his family, but that doesn't mean he knows anything. Mm-hmm. That would be my uncle coming forward and saying, I know something about the situation with Arya, but he doesn't.
Yeah. And like most leftists, he's probably never held a gun. He's never fired one. He's never learned how they can be safe and accepted them into his life. And that's really sad and unfortunate. But I mean, it doesn't change the fact that you have a voice that's actually going, "Hey, half the country, this thing we just did, not okay." Not okay. And right
in regard
now,
to war, you mean?
Yeah.
Right,
well, not even the war. No, the lockdowns. Everyone on the left just wants to pretend that was cool and nothing to see here, nothing important. We didn't ruin our entire civilization for no good reason. And he's literally the only one on that side that's actually going, guys, this was not okay.
Which is all well and good. However, appearing here at the Porcupine Freedom Festival directly hurts his reputation with those exact people. And if we're not going to reach those people, he doesn't have to convince us about the lockdowns being bad.
That's true.
But if he's speaking to Democrats, he should have clout with Democrats. And if they're looking at him going, no, man, you're in bed with those libertarians now, get out of here, then he ceases to be effective at that as well.
If we can add any fuel to his fire, then I'm all for it. If we can increase his visibility, great. And the fact that he's neurotic about guns is just going to give us an excuse to have a gun rally at Porcfest, which is absurd in any other context. But now there's actually a reason to have a gun rally where there are always guns.
I think that ignores the fact that there's a power dynamic here, right? He's a politician. He wants power. In theory, we have something that he wants, and that is our votes, right? He wants to persuade it. He wants our votes, and he wants us to get out there and campaign for him and all of that nonsense. However, why isn't he offering us anything? That being the case, why is he offering us nothing and instead demanding something of us? Demanding
to be fair, he's offering us the lack of nuclear annihilation, which is more than we're getting from the other candidates. Because right now, there are no candidates that are even concerned with the possibility of us turning into radioactive dust.
I mean, okay, yes, but if we're crediting him with that, then everyone on this campsite everyone at this festival is offering us the same thing. 99.99% of Americans are offering us the same thing. So, I mean, that's a really low bar.
Yeah, but they're not going to have their finger on the button, you see.
Well, he probably won't either. And, I mean, realistically. And Vivek would probably promise not to destroy the entire planet, too. And, I mean, Donald Trump would promise not to destroy the entire... He had his finger on the button for 4 years and never destroyed the entire planet.
No, he's going to do it with China. That's how this works.
He didn't do it previously.
That's true. We've lucked out so far. We haven't had a nuclear war with China or Russia, which seem to be the options that we have for voting. Do you want to have a nuclear World War III with Russia or China or both?
I think the plot twist is definitely going to be that it's both. But you're absolutely right. And that was the 2016 election in a nutshell. Is Donald Trump sitting there going, China, China, China all the time. True. And Hillary going, Russia collusion, Russians. And the voting in the 2016 election was either voting for an idiot who goes, "Where's Aleppo?" or voting for war with China or war with Russia. And as I mentioned, I don't necessarily have any issue with Gary Johnson not knowing where Aleppo is. I think we need more politicians who are willing to be honest and say, "I don't know something." However, it didn't do him any favors. Gary Johnson was probably the weakest candidate we could have run. Why in the world did they send this ordinary dude named Gary Johnson to run against Donald Trump? Are you kidding? That was the year to run John McAfee. If anything was ever going to succeed, it would have been John McAfee.
Right.
He would have crushed Donald Trump. And people made the argument that, well, no, John McAfee would have done so much worse against Trump. It's like, but you don't know that. Right, well, and there's no evidence to support my claim either.
And it was a completely different race than any other. Like, what you had to stand up to was schoolyard bullying.
Right.
And John McAfee knows how to stand up to schoolyard bullying.
He's got a history of doing that. He stood up to a pimp in the state of Florida, I think it was, and said, "Hey, stop hitting this woman who's going to become my wife." So, I mean, dude stood up to authorities. He stood up to bullies. Crazy as hell, but mad respect for him, man. And I think we could have actually won that election if the American people or if the Libertarian Party had chosen to put their money behind John McAfee. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just speculation. I have no evidence to support that. But why would we send when you don't battle crazy with non-crazy?
Well, and the thing is, as far as I'm concerned, all of this politics stuff is just a great way to get people to pay attention. So if you're going to get the people's attention, why are you getting it on this guy? No, let's have someone who says, okay, here's the non-aggression principle. Non-aggression? I've never heard that word before. Like, get that guy, because what is the point of running this one?
We actually did have some Kennedy supporters over here a second ago, but they left. I suspect that was because we were not saying nice things about Kennedy. I don't know. Maybe they're with the campaign. I'd love to talk to them. There's more coming up here from the Porcupine Freedom Festival, though. Stay tuned. It is Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash masternodes to vote on. The masternodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by the Treasury. In fact, that's exactly how we got this sponsorship. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash paved the way by doing it first, nearly a decade ago. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
From Feature Story News in New York, I'm William Denslow. The US Coast Guard says people have to remain hopeful as the search for a submersible with 5 people aboard continues. Officials say underwater noises have been detected near the Titanic's wreck, where the small vessel disappeared. Gabrielle Fahmy reports.
The U.S. Coast Guard says it doesn't know what the noises are, but on Wednesday, several aircrafts heard banging sounds at 30-minute intervals. The good news, it says, is that allowed it to deploy even more resources to that area. This is a search and rescue operation. The 5 people on board are thought to have less than a day's worth of oxygen left, so time is of the essence. The vessel lost contact less than 2 hours into its dive in a remote part of the North Atlantic Sea. It was diving to the Titanic's wreck, which is about 700 kilometers south of the Canadian province of Newfoundland.
President Volodymyr Zelensky says reconstruction is key to restoring normal life in Ukraine, which will mark a real victory against Russia. He was remotely addressing the Ukraine Recovery Conference in London, which is seeking to find ways to build confidence in investing in the country.
The eyes of the world are looking at us and at whether we will defeat Russian aggression exactly as freedom deserves to win, that is without compromising our values. Also, the world is watching to see if we will restore normal life in such a way that our transformation will land an ideological defeat on their grasp.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon has reported an accounting error that's led to the overvaluing of aid it provides to Ukraine. The military aid was overvalued by $6.2 billion over the past 2 years, and the Pentagon says this has resulted in a surplus that will be used for future security packages. India's Prime Minister is in the United States on his first state visit, the highest diplomatic protocol accorded by the US to visiting leaders. Narendra Modi is slated to hold talks with US President Joe Biden on Thursday, and experts say China is driving this Indo-US engagement. Nihal Punia has more on the defense deals that will likely be announced on this trip.
For the US, this visit is crucial from 2 points of view, weaning New Delhi away from its traditional defense partner Russia and also equipping India to militarily counter China in the Indo-Pacific, which is why as many as 5 defense deals are likely to be announced. This includes India buying MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones from the US and a technology transfer that could allow India to manufacture GE's F414 jet engines locally. There's also talk of the countries jointly manufacturing armored vehicles and ammunition.
At least 29 people have been hurt in an explosion in central Paris. Authorities say the cause of the explosion is still being investigated. From bureaus worldwide, this.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, and this hour, of course, is brought to you, or this tonight's show is brought to you by Dash. You can find out more about them at dash.org. Dash is a cryptocurrency that is actually designed and meant to be used from the ground up as an actual currency. And Bitcoin, of course, I mean, right there at the top of the white paper, peer-to-peer digital cash, but Bitcoin was co-opted long ago and has stopped being useful as money. Dash doesn't have that problem. Dash remains to this day useful as money, and it's actually reasonable in regard to fees and times. It's almost instantaneous, these transactions. It also doesn't have the replace by fee that Bitcoin has, and all of these things are very technical, and they're probably not very important to you as a user. What's important is the fact that it is actually useful as a currency. You can go buy something here at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, scan a QR code, send them Dash, and be 100% confident that they will get the cryptocurrency that you sent them. You don't have to worry about 51% of tax, replaced by fee, or the blockchain being too busy, or the fee being unreasonable. None of that's an issue with Dash. You can find out more about it at dash.org. And I want to say thank you to the Dash DAO, that's the Dash Decentralized Autonomous Organization, for giving us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. So again, that's dash.org. Check it out. Always been one of my favorite cryptocurrencies. It's between Dash and Bitcoin Cash as far as like spending things on a, and I've got to give the edge to Bitcoin Cash, I think.
I like BCH.
Simply because of local.bitcoin.com. For a very long time, I was the top, and I suspect this is still true for different reasons, I was the top seller in the world at local.bitcoin.com. I was the top seller of Bitcoin Cash in the world. And it was very successful. However, the site was ultimately proliferated by scammers to the extent that 99 trades out of 100 were scammers. And I was the top trader, so I had a lot of successful trades under my belt. And I started just getting fewer and fewer actual legitimate people interested in Bitcoin Cash. And to my knowledge, the site just sort of died off as a result of that, getting taken over by scammers.
Well, this is why I'm curious what's going to happen in St. Kitts, because they've made that a currency there, because one of the activists sold alcohol there, and they knew he would always be willing to trade Bitcoin Cash for alcohol. And when you're at a resort town, that's a big part of what goes on there.
But we were talking about Kennedy and presidential candidates, and I want to be clear. I don't want to sound too harsh about these presidential candidates. I just want to be clear. I hate them and I wish they would die. I mean, sorry, let me be clear. I do kind of wish they would die, actually. I don't wish anyone harmed them, but I wish they would die of natural causes because these people are evil. I'm willing to give Vivek and RFK a pass on this. They have not been politicians yet, to my knowledge.
They haven't become evil yet.
Yes,
they haven't put on the ring of power.
They've become evil. but they haven't had the chance to be evil yet. So for them, they're just potentially evil at this point. And so to be clear, I don't wish they would die. And again, what I mean by that is I wish they would die of natural causes. As
I'm
a
glad
karmic,
you don't want to be harsh to them.
as a karmic consequence of their own actions, not as a result of any harm that anyone did to them. Ever, no one should ever harm any other person. However, that is my position on these candidates. That doesn't mean, though, that they don't do some good things.
Ideally, I would like all of the politicians to just be cured of their addiction to power.
That would be better, yes. That would certainly be a better approach. However, that doesn't seem to be the case anytime soon.
Does not seem to be the case.
They are here at the Porcupine Freedom Festival not trying to cure their addiction to power, but seeking more power. And it's possible, right? That's one of the reasons that the Libertarians want Vivek and RFK here, so that maybe we can formulate the question in exactly the right way, or put it to them in exactly the right way to get them to see that what they're doing is tyrannical and immoral and violent and aggression and coercion. It's been revealed that's not going to be the case because RFK is only taking a few questions and they've been pre-planned. And
he's taking not zero questions? It's a step.
Well,
it's an improvement.
They were pre-planned on Twitter, so his writers and he have already they can control what questions they're being asked.
Yeah.
So there's no potential here for a libertarian to raise their hand and ask, unless they're going to disrupt the flow of things, which I would advise against. There's no potential for them to ask him that ringer question that's going to get him. Right.
The one thing I liked that he did was, I don't know if you remember this, but back in November 21, he wrote a book called The Real Anthony Fauci.
Right.
And it was not an op-ed piece. I mean, it was very factual. It went back to Anthony Fauci's childhood, his history, his work with AIDS, with the HPV vaccine, all that, and really exposed how this guy operates.
Yeah, because Fauci has been, he's been a political monster for 40 or 50 years at this point, all the way back to the 80s at least.
Right, and talking about somebody who's power hungry and uses that power to just destroy people's lives and get what they want and get a lot of money. In my opinion, that's that guy.
I thought the puppy thing would be what took down Fauci. I really did, because Americans really love their puppies and their cats.
I am truly astonished that he is still in power. I am flabbergasted that he has not been run through the streets with tar and feather on him. I mean, seriously, no one's calling for this guy to not have his power?
Well,
after
this? We are, sure.
Yeah,
but we are the rare ones, and I'm with you. Let's tar and feather this dude. And again, to reiterate, tarring and feathering people doesn't have to do them any harm. It can be just embarrassing. I always thought the tar had to be hot, but as I learned from a movie that I watched a few years ago, no, it was quite possible to use coal tar and to tar and feather people that way. It wouldn't kill them, wouldn't even hurt them. It would just be tremendously embarrassing. And then it probably would take months to get it off. I don't know. Probably not pleasant, but we could do that. I would love to see us do that. Those are the options. They either need to F off or die or get tarred and feathered.
Yeah, because we need to show other power monsters that this is the kind of behavior that is unacceptable for people to do.
And the end result, honestly, of not doing this, the reason that tarring and feathering politicians should be permissible, I realize that it sounds awful to think of, but the reason it should be permissible is because if you don't do it, these things build up and build up and build up until it's straight to the guillotine.
It's true.
And we could avoid all of that by holding politicians accountable with tar and feathers.
Right.
Or just eliminating the entire political apparatus. That would be ideal.
Right. Yeah, when you don't see change for long periods of time, it builds up in people's psyches, and then the swing is always extremely harmful. Whereas what we could do is start changing things now so that they don't have to drastically swing into some kind of lethal new tyranny.
Well, they thought they made the breakthrough of having of the two-party political system where they could harness that and sort of redirect it from one party to the other, and they could have that change going back and forth. But it doesn't result in any actual real change, and I don't think it's fixing that bubbling, underlying antagonism of the system. I think it's just making it take longer to build up.
And the thing is, when you have it swing back and forth between these two powerful groups, what ends up happening is just whatever they have in common becomes the actual society, becomes the actual bureaucracy that's in charge of everything. And it turns out that what they have in common is terrible.
Not at all surprising, but I'm not familiar with RFK Jr. beyond the fact that he's a Kennedy, which means some family members of his got murdered, and I obviously oppose that. I wish I could say I had some hypothesis about what happened to JFK, but I don't.
Oh, I can tell you exactly what happened to JFK. He promised to break the Central Intelligence Agency into a million pieces. He did so publicly, and they went, "Oh, really? You think you're in control?" And they arranged for the Italian mafia to get the hitmen, and this was paid for by oil money. Now, these were the three groups that had the most gain from his demise because he had set himself against them.
Well, that's certainly plausible, but we can never know for certain is the position. Just like we can never know for certain what happened with 9/11, right? That's what I was trying to convey. Certainly, I don't believe that the story the government told us is true, because everything the government says is a lie, and everything it has stolen. But beyond that, I don't know.
Yeah,
I thought
there is an unknowability to certain things, but we do know this. On that day, things were certainly no longer what they appeared to be. Because we thought we had this representative democracy, but it turns out when your representative steps out of line, it gets taken out.
And it's just amazing. It really shows how powerful the propaganda machine controlled by the U.S. government really is. Like, and 9/11 put that on display all over again. But like, there were people there, literally there, who testified to hearing multiple gunshots, including one coming from the grassy knoll. Like, and watch his head. Watch the man's freaking head.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, they've done documentaries now with modern day technology and science, with all the angles and everything. The one that I saw, basically, my interpretation was it was impossible for it to come from the book repository.
Absolutely right.
Okay, impossible by pure physics.
Yeah, physically impossible.
Well, Bill Hicks put it best. Watch his head back into the left, back into the left.
Well, and so here's the strange
you would think
thing
that
about
in that case the bullet would come from over there where the grassy knoll happened to be.
Right. So here's the strange thing about that, though. It wasn't actually back, it was up. He was shot from below. And the reason his head exploded instead of, a bullet going through it is because it was a shotgun that was shot from the sewer. Now, the wild part about the footage is
I've never heard this. Hold on.
I have. I've heard this one.
Yeah, it's in JFK to 9/11, I think, is they've got almost every single detail
the theory is that someone was in the sewer?
Yes,
and they used a shotgun.
Like from one of the drain, the drain openings.
Exactly. And the thing about the Zapruder film that's important, because every time you see it analyzed on ABC or Fox or whatever, they always do the frame by frame analysis of exactly what it shows. And the thing is, the frame rate is the important part, because if you saw the unaltered footage, you'd see that car slow to a near stop.
I have heard that it slowed down a lot,
and that's why, because the shooting gallery that the driver had just gone through had failed to assassinate him. There were so many people shooting at him, and none of it worked. So the driver went, "Crap! I've got to do my job, which is to stop in front of this grate so that this kid," and it was this 17-year-old of all things, because an ordinary hitman's not going to go crawling through the sewer for this thing. So he ends up being the one who fires the final shot that makes the president's head explode.
What did you say this
Up
documentary was
left.
called? Because I've never even heard of this.
JFK to 9/11.
JFK did 9/11?
No, to 9/11. JFK to 9/11.
Okay. Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they called it that for a point. But we see the same sort of nonsense going on with 9/11 and pancake theory, the fact that the U.S. government doesn't even mention Building 7 in the 9/11 Commission report or the FEMA report around 9/11. And their hypothesis, their going theory, or their explanation is that 2 planes flew into 3 buildings and collapsed 3 buildings, despite the fact that, obviously, it's a meme at this point. Jet fuel can't melt steel beams. Well, it still can't. And despite the fact that no high-rise steel building has ever collapsed due to fire before and has never happened since.
And what was really sad about the truth movement is that they ended up turning on each other because they had different theories for what really happened, when the important fact is that we know we're being lied to. We know we have ample evidence that what they say happened did not happen. And that's the important part. Like, this world-changing event was staged in some way or another. Some people were in on this. And that's the part that we should have been focusing on, so we'd go, well, wait a second. Where did the money come from? Well, the 9/11 report says the money was of no interest.
Right. No practical significance, I think they said.
No practical significance. Do not look behind the curtain at who's pulling the strings on this event. That's not important.
To say nothing else of some of the more bizarre, unlikely things, like the fact that while the hijackings were going on, NORAD just so happened to be running a drill about what they would do if some airliners were hijacked by terrorists. Meanwhile, they failed to intercept said airliners repeatedly, even though they had a 100% success rate prior to that and a 100% success rate since.
And under direct orders, no less. Now,
yes, Cheney was there. Yeah. Cheney was with NORAD.
And let's not kid ourselves. That's who was running the country at the time, was Dick Cheney.
Oh,
that was the top dude at the time. And no less than Dick Cheney said, of course those orders still stand, when asked specifically, hey, can we go ahead and shoot this down now, please? No, they still stand. So if you want to tell me that this was an accident, no one could possibly have thought that this would ever occur, which is why we were training for that exact event at the time.
And people buy it, right? Yeah. And the London bombings, I think on June the 6th or whatever day it was, had exactly the same thing, where the MI5, I think it was doing an exact drill on what would happen if someone planted bombs in the London subway, and at that exact same time, some terrorists just happened to be doing that. It's just it's mind-boggling that people buy into these things. To say nothing of what about the Pentagon? We know for a fact that the FBI came and they took all available footage of whatever hit the Pentagon, and then they released 4 frames of it. 4 frames that show nothing.
Right.
Guys, what do you think they could possibly be hiding?
In the interest of national security, we cannot show that.
Right. If they have footage of planes hitting the Pentagon, first of all, what harm could it be to release that?
You would think, right?
Second of all, why only release the 4 frames that clearly seem to show an explosion, which I would expect an airliner crashing into the Pentagon, and it also just happened to hit the part of the Pentagon that had just been renovated to withstand a missile strike. Wow, what a coincidence!
And that was really the most important thing about this, is it cemented that we are following this single narrative. No matter what actually happened, no matter what evidence we see, this is the narrative. Lockstep, people. This is why we are locking down your airports forever.
Yeah, and it does no good, right? The TSO has a horrific failure rate of trying to... There's no consistency. I've flown a lot in my life, and all it seems to have done, all the TSA has ever accomplished is, 1, making sure I have to pay $9 for a bottle of water once I get past TSA security, and 2, making sure I get felt up. It's a guaranteed, unwilling, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. They're going to feel...
Gropage?
Yes, thank you.
Molestation?
Yes, that's it. I'm going to get molested when I go through TSA, for sure. Every trans person will.
It's a public service to molest all of the trans people.
They have a button there that says male or female. And if they hit male, then your bra sets it off. And if they hit female, then other things in other places set it off. And it's just a matter of which one of these things they're going to hit and where they're going to fill you up is the only difference.
Just spitballing here, but what if we didn't have these radioactive methods of looking through people's clothing that you had to go through to get on a plane?
And what the hell? What do they do? Like, again, I always get felt out. What is it that they do when I get on the other side of it? Because they put on gloves and they feel around on me, and then they wipe it with some wand, and then they scan the wand. Like, I need to know what did you just put on me, or what did you take? What the hell just happened?
What just happened?
Because it's like they were testing me or scanning me for some kind of chemical. I don't know how else to interpret what they were doing.
That was the explanation given to me. Was if there's a chemical on you, it'll get on the thing, and then when we test it with the machine, it will go, you're a terrorist.
But what?
Well, and that's the thing. None of this is useful. People get through every time that they test these things. And it sure does seem to get in the way of absolutely everything all the time for no purpose whatsoever, except it renews everyone's faith and fear so that we're all on the same narrative at the same time. That's the important part.
And I know people in the industry that are familiar with those procedures, and they've told me point blank that stuff gets through because they test it. I won't give details, but they test it, and so.
Well, there's publicly available reports.
You may think that you're safe, but my opinion, based on what I know and have heard, you're not.
Yeah.
Well, there's definitely publicly.
But people feel better, right?
Right. Well, and the thing is, they're not, since they're not catching what they're supposed to be catching. Why are we paying these people? Oh, because they make us feel like those evil terrorists will be further from us. Mm-hmm. That's what these people are doing.
Yeah, Americans don't care about results. They don't care about success. They don't care about the goals.
No.
What they care about is the pretense of feeling like they are doing something about that goal. Like if Americans really wanted to do something about poverty, they would abolish the welfare apparatus and eliminate the minimum wage. But they don't do that. Instead, they go the opposite direction because they don't care if they actually increase poverty by raising the minimum wage. As long as they feel good and can convince themselves that they tried. Mm-hmm. Don't worry, starving child. They tried.
Yeah, government did something. There was an intervention. And in fact, not only do they not care if they're making the problem worse, they're directly incentivized to make sure that this problem never goes away. Now that we've monopolized poor people, we have to make sure that poor people still exist so we keep our phony baloney jobs.
Yeah, because otherwise, we have no need in society for a TSA. I've taken all sorts of transportations that didn't have to do with the government, and I've never been searched in that capacity. I've never been put through any sort of invasive body scan. I don't even do the body scans anymore because I know I'm going to get felt up.
Right.
So if I'm going to get felt up anyway, let's just skip that and go straight to the forced massage, right?
Right.
But instead of subjecting ourselves to that, we could just get on the planes that worked just fine for decades. Honestly, if it wasn't for the government intervention, the airline industry would have collapsed long ago because it's completely unsustainable. But it exists, and the TSA is there allegedly to protect people. But as you pointed out rightly, it's just theater. It's the masks.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to make people feel better. They don't care if it works or not.
It's all optics.
The imposing uniforms at the checkpoints, the shiny badges, the stern looks.
Oh, on the subject of checkpoints, they're having sobriety checkpoints here in Lancaster throughout this weekend.
Yes.
You had an encounter with the police.
I did. I wanted to explore more of the wilderness of northern New Hampshire, so I drove up earlier today, almost to the Canadian border.
Nice.
Went up to what they call the Connecticut Lakes, which was headwaters, if you will, for the Connecticut River. And when I was driving back, I was on Route 3, which is a main thoroughfare north-south, and I stopped in the middle of nowhere at a rest stop. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, a state trooper comes out, pulls in the rest area, kind of slows down, looks me over. I pull out. He follows me for about 25 miles and had plenty of I followed, of course, the speed limit at that point. I didn't want to give any reason to have him pull me over. And plenty of opportunity for him to pass me.
Right.
But I was...
they always give you that vibe, right, when they're doing this. Like, you knew at this point that he was going to pull you over, right?
Right. If I did, the least thing wrong.
He was waiting. He was a predator stalking his prey.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
And I was stone cold sober. So the only thing he could get on me was speeding, which I didn't do.
Right.
Then I pull into a gas station as I pull into a town. He goes on his way. I get out. 2 minutes later, circles back around, kind of slows down, and then goes on his way. So I was being stalked.
Yeah.
And I don't know why.
Do you have Porcfest stickers on your vehicle?
No, I don't.
Wow.
I don't.
Nothing. Okay.
But
that would have been my guess. But why would they mess with libertarians here?
I did have an out-of-state plate. Okay.
So
maybe that was part of the reason. But
how out of state?
Like out of state, like
Pennsylvania,
Florida.
Massachusetts?
Florida.
Okay. Yeah, then he probably did assume you're up here for the Porcfest then, for the Porcupine Freedom Festival.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say. And even if you are here for that, that's profiling, and that's not right.
Yeah.
and probably scan the plate. I don't know what's in those databases.
In New Hampshire, they're not allowed to call in your plates without justification. I didn't know this until I had bought my Eclipse, and I wanted to go ahead and drive it. I didn't want to wait for the registration of the plate and all that, so I took my plates off of my Ford and I put them on my Eclipse. I was like, this will be fine. It's just got to be a day or two, right? But I pulled in a gas station to do something, to look up something on my GPS, and there was a cop who happened to be there. And so I just ignored it and went about my day and went to go pick up my friend from work. And sure enough, a few minutes later, he pulled me over and said, I ran your plates, and what's going on? Those aren't the right plates. This is not a Ford. And I didn't challenge it. I talked my way out of it. He was like, well, just tell me you're buying the car and I will look the other way and go get that taken care of. I was like, well, I'm buying the car. But I didn't know it until Ian pointed out that was illegal. He wasn't allowed to do that. He couldn't. He had no just cause, no reasonable cause for running my place. No reasonable suspicion that I had broken any laws or done anything illegal.
Okay.
Wow.
So, in theory, the cop did not, but that doesn't mean he won't.
Yeah, so I don't know why. It was just very, very strange.
Probably part of their sobriety checkpoints up here in Coos County. Well, that's it for today's show. We will be back same time tomorrow. And again, tomorrow, come hang out with us at RB46 for the topless episode of She Talk Live. It is Free Talk Live.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
Porcupine Real Estate.